How's it going, everybody? Daner here with North Central Coins, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the most rare and valuable coins in Canada. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 25 most valuable Canadian coins that you might have sitting in your change jars or collection, and if identified correctly, could make you some big money. Every single one of the coins that we discussed today, although extremely rare, is not impossible to find, and in this video we will explore each of these valuable pieces of currency and delve into why they hold such incredible value in Canadian numismatics. Additionally, we will discuss any distinguishing and identifying features, their significance among collectors, and also the potential value if you ever happen to find or own a legitimate example of any of these rare gems. Before I do get into this, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also ring that bell notification so you can stay up to date with my new content as it is being released. And make sure to stay to the end of the video if you would like to find out which are the most rare and valuable Canadian coins that you can find. And then without any further ado, what do you say we get right into it and take a look at the 25 most valuable Canadian coins you can find. Let's get it, guys. The Voyager dollar was a coin minted in Canada from 1935 to 1986 and initially featured 80% silver content until 1968. After the year 1968, a smaller nickel version circulated until the year 1987 when it was eventually replaced by the iconic loonie. Despite being discontinued, Voyager dollar coins maintain legal tender status. In 1968, after the 1967 Centennial Series, the design continued in pure nickel, marking the shift from silver. This transition also led to a reduced diameter from 36mm to 32mm, facilitating new minting processes. The series continued with occasional interruptions for circulating commemorative issues, notably in 1982 for the Constitution dollars and in 1984 for the Jacques Cartier dollar. The Constitution Act of 1982 was a vital component of Canada's constitution and facilitated the patriation process and introduced amendments to the British North America Act of 1867, renaming it the Constitution Act of 1867. It marked a pivotal moment by enacting the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, safeguarding Aboriginal rights, and also establishing procedures for constitutional conferences and outlining future amendment processes. In 1982, Canada gained full sovereignty and concluded with the proclamation signing by Queen Elizabeth II and Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau on April 17, 1982. Now, in the year 1982, they did release two different designs for the Canadian nickel dollars. They released the regular Voyager design, and then they also released this Commemorative Constitution Act Silver Dollar Commemorative. This is also the first time that the Royal Canadian Mint issued a commemorative and a Voyager dollar in the same year for circulation. The reverse design of the Constitution dollar draws inspiration from Robert Harris's painting, The Fathers of Confederation. Although the original painting perished in a fire in 1916, artist Rex Woods reconstructed a copy in 1968 with slight modifications, including the addition of 3 individuals. This iconic representation of the coin pays homage to Canada's constitutional history and commemorates the Fathers of Confederation. Now, one of the more notable errors that you can look for on a 1982 Constitution dollar is a rotated die error. The process of rotated coin dies, particularly in the context of the 1982 Constitution dollar, involves ensuring proper alignment of the dies in coin presses during the striking process. Errors can manifest when the dies experience offset, tilting, or rotation. Rotation errors specific to the 1982 dollar occur when the images on the obverse and the reverse dies are turned 180 degrees from their normal positions. These rotation errors contribute to the uniqueness and collectability of these coins as they deviate from the standard minting processes. So usually Canadian coins will come struck in metal alignment, which means that the obverse and reverse are both oriented in the same direction. But if you want to identify one of these rotated die varieties, then you want it to be in coin alignment, meaning that the obverse and reverse will be rotated 180 degrees from each other. This is usually the standard for American coins. Another interesting factor that is associated with these dollar coins is the thickness of the planchettes used to produce them. The majority of the 1982 Constitution dollars were struck on regular-sized nickel planchettes, while a small number were produced on a thinner planchette. Now you can go mad trying to find accurate information about the origins of such varieties, but the most likely reasons for this to occur during the minting process are the following. Planchette variation. During the preparation of coin blanks, variations in thickness may occur due to factors like the composition of the metal or the minting equipment's settings. Some planchettes may be thinner than the standard thickness. Error in planchette feeding. Errors in the machinery responsible for feeding planchettes into the coin press can lead to variations in thickness. If thinner planchettes are mistakenly fed into the press, coins struck from these planchettes will exhibit thinner dimensions. Quality control issues. Issues in quality control mechanisms may result in the acceptance of planchettes that deviate from the intended specifications. If thinner planchettes are not identified and removed during quality checks, they could end up being used in the coin production process. Minting anomalies. Anomalies in the minting process, such as variations in pressure or temperature, could contribute to the creation of coins with non-standard thickness. These anomalies may be unintentional, resulting in unique and rare variations. And variability in metal composition. Variations in the composition of metal used for planchettes can lead to differences in physical characteristics of the coin, including the thickness. If there are any inconsistencies in the metal alloy, it may affect how the planchettes are struck. So the rare of the two different planchette varieties is the 1982 Constitution thin planchette. My suggestion to be able to identify one of these would be pretty simple, and that is to hold on to a standard 1982 nickel dollar and use that as a comparison. If you find any of these and it has the rotated die, and then you find that the planchette is a lot thicker when you compare and do an edge check with another standard 1982 dollar, then chances are you might have one of these rare thin planchette varieties as well. Now the mintage figure for the 1982 Constitution dollar is 11,812,000. Some of the details and specifications: it is composed of 99.9% nickel, it has a weight of 15.62 grams, a diameter of 32.13 millimeters, it is magnetic, and it has a die axis in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, British, and Australian coins, but it does have that rotated die error that you can look for, and then it will be in coin alignment, which is the standard for American coins. Now, there's also a small jewel variety that you can look for on these coins, but it doesn't add much premium. If you want to be able to get the big bucks, you want to be able to find the thin planchette or a coin alignment version of this coin. So first we will start with the thin planchette in metal alignment. So this, the obverse and reverse, will both be oriented in the same direction. It will be like your standard Canadian coins, but it will have a thinner planchette. So I would compare the edge with another 1982 Constitution dollar. And if it looks like the planchette is significantly thinner, then you might have yourself a fairly rare coin. Now, there aren't any low-end values listed, but I would say that you could get a couple $100s if you do identify the thin planchette in metal alignment. The only value that is listed is an MS63 example, and it can be worth around $5,000. So this is one of the most rare and valuable of the Canadian nickel dollar series, and definitely a good one to look for. And then you can also look for the version of the thin planchette that is in coin alignment, meaning that the obverse and reverse will be rotated 180 degrees from each other, and it will have the same orientation as American coins. Now, if you can identify the coin alignment, and then it also has a thin planchette, it can be worth around $3,000 for an MS60 and all the way up to $5,000 for an MS63 example. If you found one of these and it's not in the greatest shape, I don't doubt that you could still probably get a couple $100s for them, especially considering that there aren't too many of these Voyager dollars that are super valuable. And then the last is going to be the most rare and valuable of these 1982 Constitution dollars, and that is the Constitution regular sized planchette in coin alignment. So this one is going to be like American coins. The obverse and reverse will be rotated 180 degrees. In terms of its value, it can be worth around $4,500 for an MS-60, around $7,000 for an MS-63, and all the way up to $15,000 for an MS-66 example. If you did find one of these and it's on the lower end, I don't doubt that you could get anywhere from $500 to $1,000. A lot of people like to buy those 1948 silver dollars, but who knew that there was a nickel dollar that could be almost as valuable? In the 1950s, a comprehensive study was conducted to evaluate the operational efficiency and infrastructure of the Canadian Mint, which had suffered physical deterioration in the aftermath of World War II. The Mint's facilities were found to be overcrowded and outdated and unable to meet the increased demand for coin production. As a result, significant modernization efforts were initiated. To address the pressing needs for improvement, new cutting-edge machinery was introduced while existing equipment underwent enhancements to boost productivity and efficiency. Also, the physical space of the mint was expanded to accommodate the upgraded machinery and streamline operations. The surge in demand for Canadian coins, which had previously been attributed to post-war circumstances, was now recognized as a sustained trend and needed a recalibration of the production norms. Orders for coinage had consistently exceeded 100 million pieces annually over a 12-year period, indicating a permanent shift in the landscape of Canadian circulation coins. Amidst these developments, a decision was made to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the discovery and naming of the element nickel by Swedish chemist A.F. Cronstedt. Given Canada's pivotal role as a leading global nickel producer during World War II, a special circulating 5-cent coin was commissioned to honor this milestone. An extensive competition yielded a design by Stephen Trenka featuring a depiction of a nickel refinery in Sudbury, which was unveiled at the Canadian Mint in December 1950. Stephen Trenka, an accomplished designer hailing from Thornhill, Ontario, had previously gained recognition for his work, including the design of the 1958 British Columbia silver dollar. Born in Budapest, Trenka pursued his artistic education at the Royal School of Design before immigrating to Canada in 1929 and furthering his studies at the Ontario College of Art. The culmination of these efforts was the creation of the Big Nickel, a colossal 9-meter replica of the 1951 commemorative Canadian nickel. Situated at the Dynamic Earth Science Museum in Greater Sudbury, Ontario, the Big Nickel stands as the largest representation of a coin globally. Its inception was the brainchild of Ted Silva, a visionary fireman who envisioned a major tourist attraction celebrating Sudbury's centennial. Despite initial rejection by the Sudbury Canada Centennial Committee, Silva's persistence led to the realization of his ambitious concept, which eventually led to the construction of the iconic Big Nickel. The legacy of the Big Nickel endured beyond its physical presence, as it inspired a range of tokens and medals sold at the Canadian Centennial Numismatic Park from 1964 to 1982. Visitors to the park had the opportunity to acquire souvenirs commemorating this iconic landmark. So now that I have given you guys some context and information into the 1951 commemorative Canadian nickels, what do you say that we get into the coin that you are all here to find out about? The half moon variety of the 1951 Canadian commemorative nickel refers to a distinctive die clash found on some examples of this coin. Die clashes occur when the dies used to strike the coin come into contact without a planchette in between, leaving an impression of the design elements from one die onto the other. In the case of the Half Moon variety 1951 commemorative nickel, a small die clash resembling a half or crescent moon can be observed underneath the final digit of 1 in the double date of 1751 to 1951. This small crescent moon-shaped die clash is typically found to the left of the smokestack on the reverse design of the coin, and it may actually be in contact with the smokestack. Now, identifying the half moon variety involves careful examination of the area around the final digit of the year on the reverse side of the coin. The die clash manifests as a raised crescent-shaped mark, often with some detail resembling the shape of a moon. It may appear slightly flattened due to the pressure of the die clash. Now, the causes of these die clashes can vary, but they commonly occur when the dies come into contact during the minting process without a blank planchette between them. This can happen due to improper alignment or pressure adjustments during the coin striking. When the dies collide, they leave behind impressions of design elements on the opposing die, which results in these clash marks on the subsequent coins struck by these dies. The half moon variety is considered a minor error or variety, adding a unique characteristic to certain examples of these 1951 Canadian commemorative nickels. Collectors often find such varieties intriguing and seek them out as part of their numismatic pursuits. The presence of these die clashes can greatly affect the value of these coins, especially if they are well-defined and well-preserved examples. Now, before we get into the values for the 1951 commemorative nickels, first some of the details and specifications. The 1951 commemorative has an overall mintage of 8,239,321. It should have a weight of 4.54 grams, a diameter of 21.3 millimeters. Its die axis should be in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins. The coin was designed and engraved by Thomas Humphrey Paget for the obverse and Stephen Trenka for the reverse commemorative design. Now, one of the great things about this nickel variety is that they made quite a few of the 1951 commemorative nickels with a mintage figure just above 8 million. There is far more of these than the standard beaver design 1951 nickels. Those are actually quite rare as well, and there is an extremely rare variety you can look for on those. But PCGS does attribute this error if you do happen to find one and send it in to be graded at a company like PCGS or ICCS. This is an error or variety that you can get attributed and can add a value to your coin. Now, it doesn't have a ton of value on the low end. It can be worth around $1 for a VF20, which isn't at the absolute bottom of the Sheldon scale, but it is a really beat up and worn example. So $1 isn't too bad for a coin that you only pay 5 cents for if you happen to find one of these in your pocket change or coin roll hunting. Now, as we start to get into the mint state range, you will see some massive price jumps. Just to give you guys an idea for comparison, the regular 1951 commemorative without any errors or varieties can be worth around $22 for an MS64. If you can identify the half moon variety on the 1951 commemorative, it can be worth around $125 for an MS64. Now, that is currently the highest graded listed example for this coin, but just to give you guys an idea, the 1951 regular commemorative strike is worth around $200 for an MS66. So if you extrapolate and work upwards through the grading tiers, I estimate that you could get anywhere from $500 to $1,000 easily for one of these if you found one and it scored an MS66 or MS67. Now, I have actually found 2 full rolls of these 1951 commemoratives in one of my coin roll hunts. It was one of the most epic hunts of my coin roll hunting career, and I made sure to check all of them for the half moon variety, and to be honest, there was not a single one in there. But the good news about that is that there is quite a few of these 1951s floating around. You just have to keep your eyes open, and you may even be able to find one in your pocket change if you are lucky. And if you can identify the half moon variety, you can make yourself some pretty decent money. So between the years of 2000 and 2006, it was quite an experimental time at the Royal Canadian Mint for Canadian pennies, and because of this, 6 different varieties were actually created for the Canadian 2006 penny, and amongst those, there is a Holy Grail penny that can be worth crazy amounts of money. In the past, I've discussed some of the Holy Grail coins that have been discovered or that you can actually find, but there are a few modern coins that are as rare and valuable as the 2006 P non-magnetic Canadian penny. The thing about this coin is that you actually have a decent chance of finding one of them if you hunt pennies regularly. I have actually heard of Canadian coin roll hunters stumbling upon this rare gem. It is honestly one of the most well-known and looked for pennies in Canada that you actually have a decent chance of finding eventually. In terms of its scarcity, this penny actually reminds me a lot to the 1922 to 1925 George V pennies. These pennies, although extremely rare and hard to come by, are not impossible to find, and even in low-grade examples of both the 2006 P non-magnetics and also some of the early 1920s small pennies, they can all be worth minimum of $20 to $30, even at the bottom of their grading tier. So very similar values and scarcity for these Canadian pennies. So stay tuned, because I'm definitely going to be making some videos in the future on those early 1920s Canadian small cents. They can be worth just absolutely insane money. But what do you say we discuss the values and specifications of these 2006 Canadian pennies? Because as I mentioned, there are 6 different varieties, and some of them can be worth some okay money, some of them can be worth pretty much face value, and some of them can be worth a whole heck of a lot of money. And I'm also going to talk briefly about an extremely valuable 2005 Canadian penny out of a proof set that you should definitely have on your radar as well. So let's get into the values of these coins. I'm going to start with these 2005s because they're actually a little bit easier. Now, in terms of value, the 2005s are not too rare or too valuable, at least to find the business strikes or circulation examples. But there exists an extremely rare and valuable variety for the 2005 Canadian pennies, and it is actually a proof strike, and that is the 2005 P non-magnetic Canadian proof penny. Now, just to give you guys an idea of the values of the 2005 Canadian pennies, the 2005 regular Canadian proof strike, so no P mint mark, is worth around $1.95 for a PL64 example, and can be worth around $40 for a PL67. The 2005 P from the proof sets, the magnetic example, is worth around $1.45 for a PL64 and can be worth all the way up to $32.90 for a PL67. And then we have the 2005 P non-magnetic. Now this thing is a holy grail. Your chance of finding it in a coin roll hunt is pretty much slim to nil, but never say never. I have seen much crazier things happen. Your best chance of finding one of these 2005 P non-magnetic Canadian proof pennies is to carry a magnet around with you, go to coin shops, flea markets, maybe check Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji and look for 2005 Canadian proof sets with P mint marks. And basically you just got to throw that magnet onto the penny, and if it doesn't stick to the penny, you might have a holy grail coin that can be worth $1,150 for a PL64 and all the way up to $3,290 for a PL67. This is one of the holy grails of the modern Canadian pennies. There were very few examples struck, so definitely keep your eyes out for 2005 P proof sets. And if you have a magnet with you, maybe just give that penny a little tap, and if it doesn't stick, then you might have a jackpot on your hands. All right, so what do you say we start going through the 2006 pennies? I'm going to discuss the compositions as well as some of the identifying factors of these pennies, so that way you can find the ones that are worth good money, because there are 2 of the 2006 pennies that can be extremely rare and valuable. So the first one that we are going to discuss is not going to be one of the rare ones, and that is the 2006 with a P mint mark, and this is a magnetic example. So to identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse and look for a little P mint mark under the bust of the queen. It will also have a magnetic steel planchette. Now, in terms of value, it's worth around 5 cents for an MS60, so pretty much worth face value at the bottom of the MS scale, maybe slightly more. And this one can be worth $73.70 for an MS67 example, which is an extremely high grade example. Now, next up, we're actually going to discuss the rarest and most valuable of the 2006 Canadian pennies, and that is the 2006 P non-magnetic. So basically, to identify this one, you want to flip over to the obverse of the coin and look for a little P mint mark under the bust of the queen. This coin will have a non-magnetic copper planchette. Now, one of the great things about the rare 2006 pennies that also makes them one of the most searched for pennies here in Canada when it comes to coin roll hunting is that they actually have a pretty decent value on the low end. Now, the 2006 P non-magnetic can be worth around $40 for a VF12, so that is pretty much at the bottom of the Sheldon scale. Even if it is absolutely beat up, sat in a parking lot, you're going to be getting $10 or $20 for this coin. People want them for their collection, and even though they are out there, they are honestly a unicorn, and you almost never stumble across them. So as I mentioned, this 2006 P non-magnetic can be worth around $40 for a VF example. It can be worth $132 for an almost uncirculated 50. And then on the high end, it can be worth $500 for an MS60 and all the way up to $2,000 for an MS65. This is a fairly recent penny. I have found coins much older in a high mint state before, so your chances of finding one of these and it actually being in decent condition is not too terrible, honestly. So always keep your eyes out for the 2006 pennies and throw your 2006 Ps to the side. Check them with the magnet, and if that magnet does not stick, then you have yourself one extremely rare coin. Now, next we'll get into the 2006s with the Royal Canadian Mint logo. Now, there is a non-magnetic and a magnetic. Neither of these are particularly rare or valuable. The first we will discuss is the 2006 non-magnetic with the Royal Canadian Mint logo under the bust. To identify it, you want to flip over to the obverse, look for the Royal Canadian Mint logo under the Queen's bust, and this will have a non-magnetic copper planchette. In terms of value, it's worth around 10 cents for an MS60, and it can be worth up to $45.30 for an MS67, which is an extremely high grade. And then we have the 2006 Royal Canadian Mint logo with a magnetic planchette. To identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse, look for that Royal Canadian Mint logo under the Queen's bust. It will have a magnetic steel planchette, and it can be worth around $1.95 for an MS60 and around $177 for an MS67. So this is definitely the rare of the two varieties, and it may be a good idea to pull a few of these to the side if you're a coin roll hunter. The 2006 Royal Canadian Mint magnetic seems to be the rare and more valuable of the two. And the last two varieties for the Canadian 2006 pennies that we are going to discuss today are the 2006s without any mint marks. Now, just like the previous four pennies mentioned, there is a magnetic and non-magnetic example for the 2006 Canadian penny with no mint mark. The rare one of the two is the 2006 magnetic. First, we'll discuss the 2006 non-magnetic. Now, to identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse of the coin, and there will be no P or no logo of the Royal Canadian mint mark under the Queen's bust, and it will also have a non-magnetic copper planchette. In terms of value, it's worth around 5 cents for an MS60 example. It can be worth around $47 for an MS67. So very similar prices on the high end for the more common of the 2006 coins. And then we have the second of the Holy Grail 2006 pennies, and that is the 2006 magnetic no mint mark. Now, to identify this, you want to flip over to the obverse of the coin, and you are looking for no mint mark under the Queen's bust. It will have a magnetic steel planchette. Now, it was not made in sets, it was only released in circulation. I have still yet to find either of these two of the rare 2006 pennies, but I shall keep looking, and maybe, just maybe, I will have my day. In terms of value, the 2006 magnetic no mint mark can be worth around $75 for an MS60 and all the way up to $863 for an MS67. This one isn't super valuable on the low end. It can be worth around $10 to $20. If it's in a low grade state, people still really want it for their collections. And because you almost never stumble across these things in the wild, people are always willing to pay a premium to add them to their collection. If you ever did find one of these, I would suggest trying to sell it on maybe eBay or Facebook Marketplace. That's usually where you get the most amount of money for these coins. You can maybe try taking it to your local coin shop, but they're usually not interested in varieties like this. They might pay you like a couple dollars or something like that if you're lucky. The Canadian 50-cent coin, also known as pièce de 50 cents in French, is a coin worth 50 cents in Canada. The first domestically produced Canadian half-dollar was struck by Governor General Earl Grey on January 2, 1908 during the opening ceremonies for the Ottawa branch of the Royal Mint. This silver 50-cent coin had the effigy of King Edward VII. Although the coin is regularly minted, it is not produced in large quantities, with an average annual production of only 150,000 half-dollars since the year 2004. Since then, it has only been available to the public directly from the mint. It is rare to come across this coin in everyday transactions because many Canadians mistakenly believe that it is rare and worth more than 50 cents. When most people receive a 50-cent coin, they often save it instead of spending it. Some even question whether it is actually legal tender due to its non-circulating status. The Canadian 50 cent is similar to the United States half-dollar and is generally not accepted by vending machines. The Royal Canadian Mint attempted to promote the use of the coin in 2002 by releasing a special edition to mark the 50th anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's ascension to the throne. However, this promotion was unsuccessful and the Mint stopped distributing 50-cent coins to banks. Currently, the Mint only sells them in rolls or in coin sets directly from their numismatic department at twice their face value or $25 per roll of 25 coins. So now that we have some brief information on Canadian half-dollars, what do you say we discuss this Holy Grail 50-cent coin, which is the 2000p half-dollar? The 2000p 50-cent coin is a rare Canadian coin that has gained popularity amongst collectors due to its scarcity. The 2000p 50-cent coin is composed of multiply plated steel, and it was released to celebrate the launch of the new plating facility of the Winnipeg Mint in Manitoba, Canada. The rarity of this 50-cent coin is what makes it so highly sought after. Only 276 2000p 50-cent coins were ever produced. This limited run has made this coin an extremely rare item, and collectors are willing to pay top dollar to add it to their collections so they can own such a revealed piece of Canadian numismatic history. There are multiple ways to approach the acquisition of this coin. You could look for one still in the clock, which would present several challenges, the biggest being authenticity, or you could look for one that has been pulled from the clock and is either graded or loose from its original clock holder. This coin was produced as a special presentation item and was not intended for general circulation. Instead, it was only given to mint employees, making it difficult to find examples floating around in the wild. Additionally, many of the coins that were handed out were quickly snatched up and hoarded, leaving few examples available for collectors today. The 2000p's design features the image of the Canadian coat of arms on the reverse side, with the diadem portrait depicting Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse of the coin. It has a reeded edge, is made of multiply plated steel, and it also contains a P mint mark located below the Queen's bust on the obverse, which would indicate it is indeed the Holy Grail 2000p. The value of a Canadian coin can be affected by several factors, including its rarity, condition, and historical significance. Coins that are in better condition and have a unique history tend to be more valuable than those that are not. Also, depending on if the coin remained in the original clock or was broken out to be graded may affect the value, as some may want them in the original state. I personally would much rather have this coin inside of the clock for display purposes. For anyone that is actually interested in purchasing this coin or adding it to their collection, the thing that I would stress the most is to ensure the coin's authenticity and to make sure that it has not been tampered or altered with in any way, especially if you are buying one still in the clock examples. I've seen a few different pictures that depict different looking clocks. You can find some in watches, so you want to make sure that this is a legit example, and hopefully if you're lucky it will even come in the original presentation box that it was given out with. When purchasing any coin, it is important to look for signs of authenticity, such as the correct weight and diameter, as well as any distinguishing marks on the coin. It is also recommended to purchase a coin that is independently certified by a reputable coin grading service such as PCGS or NGC. Now, a few specifications on Canadian half dollars. From the year 1870 to 1919, they had a weight of 11.62 grams, they had a diameter of 29.72 millimeters, and their composition was 92.5% silver, 7.5% copper, or sterling silver. From the year 1920 to 1967, they had a weight of 11.66 grams, a diameter of 29.72 millimeters. They were composed of 80% silver and 20% copper. From 1968 to 1999, they had a weight of 8.10 grams and a diameter of 27.13 millimeters and were composed of 99.9% nickel. From the year 2000 to the present, half dollars had a weight of 6.90 grams. They had a diameter of 27.13 millimeters and also a thickness of 1.95 millimeters, and the composition is 93.15% steel, 4.75% copper, and 2.1% nickel plating, also referred to as multiply plated steel. And this is the composition that the 2000p Canadian 50-cent coin will come in. It will come also with a diameter of 1.95 millimeters instead of the 1.93 that the coins came in from 1968 to 1999. So be mindful of those specifications, but if it does have that P mint mark, then chances are you probably have this extremely rare and valuable Holy Grail half dollar. But what do you say we discuss some of the potential values for the 2000p Canadian clock half dollar? Now, if you were to send this coin in to be graded, it should get a proof designation because it was released as a special presentation item. It is a rare and valuable coin, and it is also considered a proof strike. Now, just to give you guys an idea of value, the regular 2000 Canadian proof half dollar is worth around $1.95 for a proof 63 and around $25 for a proof 66. Now, on the slightly rarer end of the 2000 Canadian half dollars, we have the 2000 Winnipeg Mint. Now, this won't have a P mint mark, but it will have a small W mint mark indicating it was struck at the Winnipeg Mint, and this will be located to the bottom left of the Queen's bust. In terms of value, it's not much more valuable than the previously mentioned half dollar. It's worth around $3.90 for a proof 64, but it can be worth all the way up to $25.40 for a proof 66 example. And then last but not least, we have the Canadian 2000p half dollar. Now this is one of, if not the most valuable of the modern Canadian half dollars. It is worth insane money. And if you ever come across a clock that looks like it might have a 2000 half dollar in it, and it isn't selling for ridiculous money, don't even think about it, buy it. Because if you do, this coin can be worth around $3,920 for a proof 60 example. It can be worth around $8,800 for a proof 63 and all the way up to $10,600 for a proof or PL example. Now that is buku insane amounts of money for a Canadian 50-cent coin, but I am not too surprised considering that this one only has 276 examples and a super rare and unique history behind it. In conclusion, the value of the 2000p 50-cent coin is likely to continue to increase over time, as its rarity makes it a highly sought-after item amongst collectors. And whether you are a seasoned collector or just starting out in your coin collecting journey, this is definitely a good coin to have on your radar. You might never ever see one, you might never touch one, but still it's good to know about some of these rare coins because you never know if one is maybe floating around at a flea market or you're scrolling through eBay and you might stumble upon an authentic example of one of these and be able to make some really good money. In the year 1939, Canada entered World War II. This period saw global tension as Canadian forces, along with those of Great Britain, France, eventually the United States, and other countries fought against the Axis powers in Europe, Asia, and North Africa. Although World War II ended in the year 1945, much of the world remained in a state of socio-political turmoil for several years following the war. While operations at the Canadian Mint in Ottawa, Canada's capital city, returned to normal, on the other side of the world, India, which was part of the British Empire, was experiencing social upheaval. A movement for independence, largely led by anti-colonial activist Mahatma Gandhi, achieved its goal on August 15, 1947, when India finally became a fully independent nation. India's independence had implications for the ongoing production of Canadian coinage. Starting in the year 1937, during King George VI's reign, Canadian coins featured an inscription on the obverse side reading Georgius VIDG Rex ETIND-IMP, which is an abbreviation for the Latin phrase King George VI by the grace of God and Emperor of India. By the year 1948, new dies reflecting India's independence had not yet been prepared at the Royal Canadian Mint. As a result, the production of Canadian coins dated 1947 actually continued into 1948, and these coins would feature a small maple leaf to the bottom right-hand side of the 7 in the date. The limited mintage of Canadian coins in the year 1948 can be attributed to several factors, each playing a crucial role in shaping the production of coins during that period. The first was the change in inscription. One of the primary reasons for the reduced coin production in 1948 was the need to change the inscription on Canadian coins. Until that year, the coins bore the inscription ETIND-IMP, which signified that the reigning British monarch was also the Emperor of India. But in 1947, India gained its independence from British rule and the British monarch was no longer the Emperor of India. This significant change necessitated the alteration of the coin inscriptions to reflect the new reality. The process of changing the inscription on coins involved the creation of new master dies and working punches. These tools were essential for minting coins with the updated design and inscription, replacing the ETIND-IMP. This process was time-consuming and intricate, leading to delays in acquiring the necessary dies and punches for the production of the coins with the new design. Due to the complexities involved in producing these new dies and punches, they were not actually available until late into 1948. This delayed the commencement of coin production with the updated designs, and as a result, coin production for that year had a late start, further limiting the number of coins that could be minted with the date 1948. Another noteworthy factor contributing to the limited coin production in 1948 was actually the lack of demand for dollar coins from specific regions in Canada. Cities such as Calgary, Halifax, St. John's, and Regina did not request any dollar coins for that year. This reduced the demand for specific denominations and also played a crucial role in the overall decrease in coin production. The scarcity of Canadian coins minted in the year 1948 can be attributed to the need for a significant change in coin inscriptions following India's independence. The time-consuming process of creating the new dies and working on punches, and also the late arrival of these tools, reduced demand for certain denominations in specific regions in Canada. These factors combined to make 1948 coins a unique and limited year in Canadian numismatic history, with relatively few coins minted compared to other years. Now, what makes these 1948 and 1949 pennies so special is not only their limited mintage, but also the fact that there are several different varieties that you can look for. These variations all gravitate around the positioning and size of the denticles and relativity with the text on the coin. The reason for all of these different varieties is they were probably doing some experimenting and trying to see what worked out the best, and they wanted to differentiate between the different coins that they were experimenting with, and the best way that they could do that is with changing the size and placement of the denticles and wording. So there are several different varieties for both the 1948 and 1949. There are 3 noteworthy varieties for the 1948 and 2 for the 1949. Now for the 1948, there are small and large denticle varieties, and it can affect the value depending on the size of the denticle. For the 1949, the size does not matter as much, only the orientation of the last A in gratia and relativity to the denticles. So what you want to do is look at the top of the A, and if it points directly to a denticle, then you have yourself one of the rare varieties. Now for the 1948, you want it to point towards a small denticle. That is the rarest of the 3 different varieties, and the A to the large denticle is also fairly valuable as well. Now with the 1949, you also want that last A in gratia to point directly to one of the denticles, and if you can identify that, it is the rarer of the 2 varieties. So what I'm going to do is give you guys some of the details and specifications for both of these pennies, and then I'll go through and read off the different values for the different and most valuable varieties that you can look for. So the 1948 and 1949 pennies are composed of 98% copper, 0.5% tin, 1.5% zinc. They have a weight of 3.24 grams, a diameter of 19.05 millimeters. The obverse was designed and engraved by T.H. Paget, and the reverse was designed and engraved by G.E. Gray. The edge of the coin is smooth, it is non-magnetic, and it has a diaxis in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, British, and Australian coins. So what I'll do is go through and give you guys first the low end values for the different rare varieties for the 1948 and 1949 pennies, and then I will give you guys the MS values for these coins as well. They can be super valuable if you do find them and they are in really good shape. And never say never, because I've done penny hunts and found some older George VI coins that were almost hitting the MS mark. So first we'll start with the 1948. Now, the rare variety that you want to look for the 1948 is the A points directly to the small denticle. Now, if you can identify that, it can be worth even $1 in a VG, which is pretty much the bottom of the Sheldon scale, not at the absolute bottom, but it is a pretty beat up and worn penny, and you are getting 100 times its face value. That is a pretty extreme premium, and you don't often see premiums like that at the low end for Canadian coins. Now, it can be worth around $30 for an AU 50 example, and that is for the 1948 A points to small denticle penny. Now, for the 1949, you are looking for the A points to the denticle. This one is actually a little bit more rare and valuable than the 1948. This one can be worth around $6.70 in a VG8. So that is the same grade as the previous one. Not right at the bottom of the Sheldon scale, but pretty darn close. So even if you found one and it is beat up and worn, you can still get a couple dollars for this penny, which is a huge premium for a coin that only has a face value of 1 cent. It can be worth around $41 for an AU 50 example, which is right before you hit the MS mark. So the 1949 A points to denticle is the rarest of all of these penny varieties that you can look for. Now, when you start to get into the MS range, the 1948 A points to large denticle is not quite as valuable as the A points to small denticle, but it is still worth some decent money. It can be worth around $6.50 for an MS60. It can be worth around $364 for an MS65, but then you see a massive price jump, as currently there is an MS66 graded example that is evaluated at around $1,620. So that tells you that there probably aren't too many high grade examples of this coin out there. So if you ever happen to come across any uncirculated rolls of 1948s or 1949s, don't think about them, buy them. But the rarer of the 1948s that you can look for is the A points to small denticle. If you can identify the last A in gratia and it is pointing to a small denticle, it can be worth around $70 for an MS60 and all the way up to $882 for an MS65, which is currently the highest graded known example. Now this one is at least twice as valuable as the 1948 A points to large denticle. It's worth around 521 for an MS65, but the previous A points to large denticle penny was worth 1,620 for an MS66. So considering that the highest graded known example of this coin is only an MS65, if you did ever find one of those and it did score any higher, you could easily be talking a $2,000 to $5,000 penny, and that is for the 1948 A points to small denticle. Now for the 1949, you are looking for the A points to denticle. This one is actually the most rare and valuable of all of the different pennies that you can look for. It is worth around $70 for an MS60, and even though that is still technically a mint state penny, your chances of being able to score in the low MS region are not impossible when it comes to coins like King George VI if you do happen to come across a penny box, or maybe you go to your local coin shop and you buy a big old bag of scrap pennies. That's what I have actually done in the past, and I found some really amazing stuff. So the 1949 A points to denticle can be worth around $71 for an MS60. So that could actually be a huge premium. Even if you sent this to be graded by PCGS, you could still make a profit off of this coin if you did identify a legitimate example. Now the highest graded known example currently for the 1949 A points to denticle is an MS66, and it is currently evaluated at $13,900. That is a whole lot of money for a penny that you actually have a decent chance of finding. I have found plenty of 1949s in my coin roll hunt. I have not found any of the super rare varieties, but I will definitely keep my eyes open for this penny, and you guys definitely should too. It never hurts to be armed with a little bit of knowledge so you don't accidentally throw a coin back into circulation that could be worth thousands of dollars, if not more. The reverse of the coin was designed by Walter Ott, an Austrian-trained master engraver, artist, and designer who worked at the Royal Canadian Mint in Ottawa. The design shows a constable holding a bamboo-shafted lance carried by members of the RCMP on horseback. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police's horse breeding program began in 1939. In 1973, 134,958,587 quarters were produced for circulation, and proof and specimen coins were also made. The design was changed up from a caribou to the mounty design, and the obverse die was retooled to ensure proper metal flow. The size of Queen Elizabeth II's obverse portrait was reduced to achieve fine details on the reverse, and the ornamental beading on the obverse was also modified. Virtually all of the 1973 RCMP Centennial Canadian quarters were struck with the smaller busts on the obverse, but a small amount of the coins were produced with the obverse of 1972, creating the two varieties of the small and large bust. The amount of coins with the large bust does not exceed 10,000 according to the Charlton and PCGS guides and website. When the dies were retooled in 1973, it resulted in a smaller portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse of the coin, with greater refinement to her hair detail. Another way to differentiate between the large and small bust quarter is by the placement of the beads and the top of the letter A in Regina. The large bust quarter has beads that sit close to the rim, and the top of the A points directly to a bead, while the small bust quarter has beads set farther from the rim, and the top of the A points at a spot between two beads. The size of the bust and position of the head on the coin are extremely important details. On the large bust, the beads will appear to touch the rim of the coin, while there is space between the beads and the rim on the small bust quarter. If you're still unsure, one of the best ways is actually to compare it to a 1972 25-cent coin, which will have the large bust and bead arrangement as if it were the 1973 large bust. Now we'll get into the specifications and value of the 1973 Mounty quarters. They are composed of nickel. The monarch on the obverse of the coin is Queen Elizabeth II. It has a weight of 5.1 grams. They have a diameter of 23.8 millimeters, a thickness of 1.6 millimeters. The coin is in metal alignment, as most Canadian coins are, and the edge of the coin is reeded. Now, the Canadian 1973 Mounty quarter comes in all three of the different Canadian finishes that were offered at that time. It comes in a business strike, which will get an MS designation. It comes in a proof strike, which will get the PL designation, and also a specimen, which will get the SP. Now, depending on the finish of the coin, it will heavily affect the value. The business strike is the most valuable of the bunch, but the other ones are quite valuable as well, and it's definitely a good idea to keep your eye open, especially at flea markets and if you're buying coins in an estate sale or maybe in a lot on eBay. So in terms of value, the 1973 small bust business strike is worth around $1 for an MS-60, and it can actually be worth all the way up to $61 for an MS-65. Now that is for the small bust quarter. Now the 1973 large bust is worth $346 for an MS-60 example, and it can be worth all the way up to $3,240 for an MS-65. That is buku, insane amounts of money. Now in my coin roll hunts, I have found thousands and thousands of the 1973 mounty quarters. I still personally have not found any of the large busts. I have known people that have found a large bust before. If you were to find one of these in a high mint state, you can make some really good money off of it. And chances are, if you do find one of these coin roll hunting, it is probably going to be the business strike. Now let's get into the proof strikes. The 1973 proof strike is only worth around $1 in a PL64. It can be worth up to $39.20 for a PL67. The 1973 large bust proof strike can be worth around $177 for a PL63 and all the way up to $677 for a PL67. So even if you were able to identify a set that contains the 1973 large bust quarter and you pay like $100 for it, if it's in decent shape, you can send it off to be graded by a company like PCGS, NGC, maybe ICCS, and make quite a return on the coin. Now lastly, we will discuss the specimen finishes for these coins. First, the 1973 small bust. It's worth around $1.94 for a specimen 66, and it can be worth all the way up to $14.70 for a specimen 67. The 1973 large bust specimen can be worth around $173 for an SP64 and all the way up to $539 for an MS67. Now, I have actually owned 1973 specimen sets. You can usually pick them up from your local coin shops for a pretty decent price. I'm guessing that they have probably done their due diligence and checked for the large bust already. So your best chance of finding sets that may contain the large bust quarter are probably in flea markets, estate sales, or maybe in a lot on eBay or Facebook Marketplace. The world of numismatics, particularly within the realm of Canadian coins, presents a captivating facet known as mule coins. This specialized category defines coins where an inadvertent yet intriguing deviation occurs during the minting process, specifically when an incorrect die is employed to strike either the obverse or reverse of the coin. These anomalies often emerge as exceptional and sought-after specimens, adding a layer of fascination to the diverse tapestry of Canadian coinage. At the core of the definition of a mule coin lies the utilization of a mismatched die during the striking process. This departure from the intended die pairing results in the creation of coins that deviate from the standard designs. The interplay of the wrong dies introduces a distinct character to these coins, rendering them unique within the broader spectrum of Canadian numismatics. One notable example within the realm of Canadian mule coins involves the fusion of Newfoundland and Canadian coin elements. This fascinating convergence occurs when a Newfoundland coin is struck using a die for a Canadian coin or vice versa. The result is an amalgamation of design elements from both regions, creating coins that embody a unique blend of Canadian provincial heritage. Collectors and enthusiasts are drawn to mule coins due to their rarity, uniqueness, and the unexpected charm that arises from the unintentional combination of dies. The identification of these coins often requires a keen eye, as the merging of different designs may not be immediately apparent. Mules serve as a tangible artifact that showcase the intricacies and occasional errors and anomalies inherent in the coin minting process. For those that are intrigued by these mule coins, their acquisition becomes a pursuit of both historical and numismatic significance. These coins offer collectors not only a tangible link to the past, but also a testament to the variability in the coin production process. The convergence of design elements on a single coin serves as a testament to the rich history of Canadian coinage, where occasional errors and deviations from the norm result in coins that stand out as exceptionally rare and valuable pieces among collectors. Now, one coin that can be found within this remarkable numismatic landscape of mule coins is the 1870 Newfoundland mule, with only 2 known specimens currently residing in the Bank of Canada Museum. This rare breed of coin possesses a unique element and features the obverse of the 10-cent Newfoundland coins and the reverse of the Canadian 10 cents. The intricacies of these mule coins adds a layer of fascination to their historical and collectible significance. Now, this fascinating anomaly occurred in the production process of some Newfoundland 10-cent coins. It was during this phase that some of these coins were inadvertently struck using the reverse die for Canada's 10-cent coin. The result was the creation of these unique mule coins, which blend elements from different coin designs, bridging the gap between Newfoundland and Canada's numismatic heritage. For those that are eager to discern whether they possess one of these rare mule coins, there is a definitive criteria to identify them. The key lies in the inscription on the obverse, where if it reads Newfoundland coupled with the distinctive crossed maple bows with the crown design on the reverse of the coin, then it is classified as a mule. This straightforward method offers collectors a clear guideline for authenticating these extraordinary specimens within their own coin collections. The rarity and exclusivity of the 1870 10-cent mule coin is underscored by the fact that there are only 2 of these coins that are currently documented and are both safeguarded within the esteemed confines of the Bank of Canada Museum. Their presence within the museum's collection adds a layer of prestige to these numismatic treasures, further emphasizing their significance in the broader context of Canadian coinage. Now, some of the details and specifications for the 1871 mule, if any of these are off, it may indicate that it is not an authentic example. Online marketplaces like Temu, AliExpress, and eBay are just absolutely littered with fake and counterfeit examples of Canadian coins, and this 1871 mule would be an example that there could definitely be counterfeits out there floating around, so you definitely want to do your due diligence and make sure that all of these specs are on point if you do have one of these coins. Now, one unique thing about the 1871 mule is it will have an H mint mark on both the obverse and reverse of the coin. The H mint mark on the obverse will be located under the bust of Queen Victoria, and on the reverse it will be located under the bow. This indicates that the coin was struck at the Heaton Mint in Birmingham, and that is most likely where this error occurred. Now, the mintage figure for the 1871 that was not struck at the Heaton Mint is 800,000. The mintage figure for the 1871 H mint mark or Heaton Mint is 1,870,000. But technically, this mule coin was actually struck on a Newfoundland 10-cent coin, and it was accidentally paired with the Canadian reverse. So technically, it is not included in the Canadian mintage figure. It would be included in the Newfoundland mintage figure. Now, some of the details and specifications for the Canadian 1871 dime. It is composed of 92.5% silver and 7.5% copper, or sterling silver as it is more commonly known. It has a weight of 2.33 grams, a diameter of 18.03 millimeters. The coin was designed and engraved by Leonard C. Wyan for the obverse and reverse. The edge is reeded. It is non-magnetic, and it has a die-axis and coin alignment, which is usually the standard for American coins. Now, when it comes to values, I could not actually find any values or priced estimates on any websites or in any coin guides, but if I had to give an estimate for this coin, I would say that you could get anywhere around $5,000 if it's at the very bottom of the Sheldon scale. So even if it is beat up, worn, and been put through the meat grinder, if you can identify the wording for Newfoundland on the obverse, and then it has the Canadian reverse, then you have yourself an incredibly rare coin. It might be one of the rarest Canadian 10-cent coins of all time, or Newfoundland, whatever you want to classify this as. In terms of its high-end value, I don't doubt if it scored in the high MS range, you could easily get $100,000 for this coin. Chances are, if you did find one at this point, it would be pretty beat up and worn, and it is not going to be in a mint state. But never say never, crazier things have happened. Maybe one fell behind one of the presses. However it is that these incredibly rare and valuable Holy Grail coins make their way from the mint out into circulation or into people's collections is not entirely known, but it does happen, and it is always good to have an idea of what to look for so you don't accidentally let a coin that is worth a fortune go back into the wilds of circulation, or you just sell it for its silver melt value. Now, in conclusion, the tale of the 1870 10-cent mule coin unfolds a captivating chapter in the narrative of Canadian coins, where both the fusion of Newfoundland and Canada's numismatic elements create a distinct and rare category. These mule coins represent not only a tangible piece of history, but also an opportunity to engage with the fascinating intricacies of coin production and the occasional errors that result in the creation of these exceptional and highly sought-after numismatic specimens. The Canadian quarter, or 25-cent piece, holds a value of 25 cents, constituting 1/4 of the Canadian dollar. This small circular coin features a silver color and is officially known as the 25-cent piece according to the Royal Canadian Mint. However, it is commonly referred to as a quarter akin to its American counterpart. In Canadian French, it is alternatively named a caribou or 30 sous. The coin is manufactured at the Royal Canadian Mint's facility in Winnipeg, Manitoba. The quarter has underwent several changes in its metal composition over the years. From 1920 to 1967, the quarter contained 0.15 troy ounces of silver, representing 1/4 of the silver dollar's content, or half of the 50-cent piece, and 2.5 times that of a dime. In case you were wondering, here's a quick breakdown of the different compositions of the Canadian quarters throughout the years. From the year 1870 to the year 1919, Canadian quarters were composed of 92.5% silver and 7.5% copper, also known as sterling silver. From 1920 to 1967, they were composed of 80% silver and 20% copper, with half of the quarters in 1967 being struck in 80% silver and half being struck in 50%. In the years 1967 and 1968, they were composed of 50% silver and 50% copper. In the year 1968, half of the quarters were composed of pure nickel. From the years 1968 until 1999, Canadian quarters were composed of 99.9% nickel until in the year 2000 they changed the composition to 94% steel, 3.8% copper, and 2.2% nickel plating, also known as multiply plated steel. Now, the Canadian 1927 quarter holds a distinctive status in the numismatic world, characterized by its rarity and high collector value. The coin's exceptional scarcity is primarily attributed to its low mintage figure, with only 468,096 quarters produced during that specific year. This limited production contributes significantly to the coin's desirability among collectors. Now, there are several factors that do contribute to the rarity and value of coins like the 1927 quarter, and the following factors are low mintage. The term mintage refers to the total number of coins produced in a given year. In the case of the 1927 quarter, the remarkably low mintage of 468,096 coins makes its rarity compared to other years quite scarce. Coins with lower mintages are often considered much more valuable and rare due to their limited production run. Also, historical significance. Coins from specific years may carry historical significance, contributing to their collector value. The 1927 quarter was produced during a particular era in Canadian history, which could add an extra layer of appeal for collectors interested in the historical context of their numismatic acquisitions. Condition and rarity. The condition of the coin is crucial in determining its value. A well-preserved 1927 quarter in excellent condition is likely to fetch a much higher price in the collector's market. Rarity coupled with the pristine condition enhances the coin's desirability and also the potential market values. Collector demand. The demand among collectors plays a pivotal role in establishing the value of a coin. A coin like the 1927 quarter, which is known for its scarcity and historical significance, tends to attract higher demand from collectors seeking both unique and rare pieces to add to their collections. The valuation and collectability of coins, especially rare ones like the 1927 Canadian quarter, are influenced by the interplay of several factors. Numismatists often utilize various resources, including auction records, market trends, and expert opinions to determine the current market value of such coins. Additionally, third-party grading services assess the condition of the coins, providing a standardized measure that aids collectors in making informed decisions. Now, some of the details and specifications for the 1927 Canadian quarter, if any of these are off, it may indicate that it is not authentic. Right now, online marketplaces are absolutely littered with counterfeit examples for Canadian coins, and usually the older and more rare the example, the more counterfeits that will be floating around. I'm actually going to be making a video on Canadian counterfeit coins in the upcoming future. I bought some of the counterfeit examples of some of these marketplaces. I'm going to be showing you guys what to look for so you can identify counterfeits. For example, the 1911 Canadian silver dollar, the 1921 5-cent piece and half dollar. I made sure to pick up an example of all of the coins you want to look for. The 1948 silver dollar is another one that I grabbed. So I will be showing those and giving you guys some tips on how to identify counterfeits. But some of the specifications for the 1927 Canadian quarter. Now, the mintage figure, as I mentioned before, is 468,096. Now, that is an extremely low mintage figure, especially for quarters. There aren't too many Canadian quarters up until the year 1991 that have a mintage figure that low. So that is probably why this coin has such an extreme premium and can even be worth some good money on the low end. That is the reason that I wanted to make this video, is there aren't too many Canadian coins that are actually worth a lot of money in a low grade condition, but this is one that you can look for that is worth some decent money, even if it is beat up and worn. Now, some of the details for this coin: it is composed of 80% silver, 20% copper. It has a weight of 5.83 grams, a diameter of 23.62 millimeters. The coin was designed and engraved by Sir E.B. McKennell for the obverse and W.H.J. Blakemore for the reverse. The edge is reeded, it is non-magnetic, and it has a diaxis and metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, Australian, and British coins. Now, the values for the 1927 Canadian quarter, you don't need to identify any heirs or varieties. You just simply need to find the date of 1927 on your Canadian quarter. And if you can identify that date, it can be worth some pretty decent money, even on the low end of the Sheldon scale. It can be worth around $40 for a VG8 example. Now, that isn't at the very bottom, but it is a 70-point scale, and the way that it works is basically the higher the number, the better the grade. So a VG8 means that the grade or score of the coin is basically 8 out of 70. So it isn't a 0, it is a little bit better than being at the absolute bottom, but it's still a pretty beat up and worn example. You might just be able to make the date of 1927 out, and if you can find a VG8, $40 is not too bad. This is a good coin that you might be able to find in a scrap silver purchase, and then if you send it off to be graded by ICCS, you could easily turn a profit off this. Now, as we go up in the grading scale, it can be worth around $300 for an EF40, around $735 for an AU50, and as we start to get into the mid-state range, we see some pretty decent price jumps. It can be worth around $1,300 for an MS60, $3,990 for an MS64, and all the way up to $6,500 for an MS66. If you were to find one and it graded any higher, you might be talking a $10,000 coin here. Now, finding an older 25-cent coin like this and it being in good condition is probably not likely, but never say never. If you get a collection handed down to you, or maybe you bust into a roll that has been sealed for several decades, you might get lucky and find one of these gems. So what do you say we get into the 1944 tombach Canadian 5-cent coin, for which there is only one known example, making it one of the rarest Canadian coins of all time. Now, the 1944 tombach 5-cent coin is a rare Canadian coin that was made during World War II. Because Canada was experiencing a shortage of nickel during the war effort, they changed the composition of their nickel coins to a tombach brass alloy. This 1944 coin is identical to the 1942 and 1943 Victory nickels, with a weight of 4.55 grams and being composed of the tombach composition. The only difference being that it was struck with the date 1944. Now, there are two theories about this coin. The first theory suggests that only one 1944 tombach 5-cent coin exists because the rest were melted down when the mint decided to produce their coins in steel with nickel and chromium plating. The second theory suggests that the 1944 coin was a mint error, accidentally struck on a tombach planchette that slipped in with the regular steel planchettes. This theory is supported by the fact that the coin is in a very fine grade, indicating that it was circulated for a long time, which is actually a pretty good sign for coin roll hunters and collectors, because considering this was circulated and was probably found in the wild, there is a small chance there may be another one floating out there somewhere. The Charlton Standard Catalogue of Canadian Coins lists the 1944 tombach 5-cent coin as a pattern, but the 1944 Royal Canadian Mint Report indicates that it was struck as a regular issue coinage. Until another example appears, if another example ever does appear, this coin must be considered extremely unique and one of the rarest Canadian regular issue nickels of all time. So what do you say we discuss the potential value of this coin? I'm sure you are all curious. Before we do discuss the 1944 tombach, what do you say we discuss some of the other potential values of the other Canadian World War II era nickels? So first we'll start off with the 1942 Canadian nickel. Now the 1942 does not actually feature the V for Victory design on the reverse, it features the regular beaver design. The 1942 Canadian nickel comes in two different compositions. It comes in a nickel composition and a tombach composition. Now in terms of value, the 1942 Canadian nickel can be worth around $20 or $30 in the low MS range and all the way up to $1,170 for an MS65 example. The 1942 tombach is worth around $5 in the low MS range, and it can be worth all the way up to $1,080 in the high MS range. So the 1942 in the nickel composition is actually a little bit more valuable. Next, we'll discuss the 1943 Canadian tombach nickel. Now this does feature the V for Victory design on the reverse, and it only comes in one composition, which is the tombach. If you were ever to find a 1943 Canadian nickel in an actual nickel composition, then you would have another holy grail on your hands. This would probably be similar to the 1943 and 1944 steel and copper penny situation in the United States, where some of the planchettes from the previous years accidentally got put into the dies. But in terms of value, the 1943 Canadian tombach nickel can be worth around $5 in the low MS range and all the way up to $1,340 for an MS65 example. Now there are specimen examples of the 1943 tombach nickel that were sold to collectors. I believe they were sold 2 in a set and they came in a special velvet set. I may actually make a video on those separately because they are very special and unique and definitely a super important part of Canadian numismatic history. And I definitely have to say that when you look at one of the 1943 specimen tombach nickels, it is just one of the most beautiful coins that you can ever hold in your hand. The finish on it along with the strike is just absolutely beautiful. Next up is the 1944 Canadian V nickel. Now 1944 is the year when they switched up the composition. In terms of value, it's worth around $5 in the low MS range. It can be worth around $210 in the high MS range, so not super valuable for the 1944. And the last of the common Canadian World War II V nickels is actually the least valuable on the low end, being worth around $3.20 for a low MS example, but this one can actually be worth all the way up to $1,940 for a MS67 example, which I believe is the highest known graded example. If you do get a cameo attribution for any of these World War II nickels, it will definitely add a huge premium. I have seen MS65 1945s with an ultra heavy cameo that are selling for 1,000 plus. So depending on what you're going for and what your preferences are, some people would rather have a specimen strike, or some people would rather have a really nice example business strike with a cameo attribution. And last but not least, we have the Holy Grail 1944 Canadian tombach nickel. Now, nickels in 1944 were intended to be struck in nickel and chromium plated composition, but this one Holy Grail apparently slipped through the cracks, and usually when there is only a few examples of a coin, it will add some crazy value and premium to it as well. And when there is only one known example, you can be sure that it's going to be worth some really good money. The Canadian 1944 tombach World War II V nickel can be worth around $88,000 for a VF example. So we are coming up to the $100,000 mark for a coin that isn't even close to MS. If you were to find an MS example of this coin, it could easily be worth $500,000, maybe even close to $1 million if it was in the very high MS range. So even though the chances are pretty much slim to nil that you will ever see or hold one of these coins in your hand, it's still a good one to have on your radar and keep an eye out for. Canadian pattern or trial coins stand as unique and distinctive pieces that are crafted by the Canadian Mint as integral components of the coinage development process. These coins play a crucial role in assessing and refining various elements such as the design, metal composition, weight, and durability before the mass production of a new currency or coinage changes. The journey of creating new coinage initiates with the meticulous design phase. Talented artists and engravers collaborate to conceive the initial coin design, which undergoes multiple revisions to meet the artistic, historical, and technical standards set by the Canadian Mint. The Mint will also experiment with different metal compositions, exploring alloy mixes and surface finishes like matte or proof-like. Once the optimal design and metal composition are determined, a limited number of trial coins are minted using specialized equipment. These trial coins then undergo rigorous quality control processes to ensure that they align with the mint's exacting standards. The next phase involves subjecting these coins to comprehensive testing, including assessments of durability and wear resistance, to guarantee their ability to withstand the rigors of circulation. Mint officials and experts meticulously reviewed the trial coins, making any necessary adjustments or modifications. Upon approval, the mint can proceed with the mass production of the finalized coin design, ultimately entering it into general circulation. Encountering Canadian pattern or trial coins in everyday transactions is an exceedingly rare occurrence. These coins are specifically crafted for internal purposes and are often retained by the Canadian Mint for reference, archival collections, or occasionally made available to collectors during special events. The primary enthusiasts seeking these coins include collectors, numismatists, and historians who value them for their unique designs, metal compositions, and also the insights that they provide into the coinage development process. For those curious about the possibility of stumbling upon such coins in your pocket change, it's very important to note that the chances are pretty much slim to nil. However, if a coin appears unusual or deviates from the standard circulation coinage designs, it may be worth having it examined by an expert or professional numismatist, as it could potentially be a rare or pattern trial piece. So now that I've given you some context on how these coins come into existence and how incredibly rare they truly are, what do you say we discuss the coin that you are all here to find out about, and that is the 1964 commemorative pattern tin dollar. Now you might be asking why I am referring to this coin as a tin dollar and not a silver dollar, and that is because a few of these Holy Grail trial coins were produced in a tin composition. It is not uncommon for mints to experiment with metal compositions, and it would seem like they were considering producing the Canadian dollar coins in tin around the year 1964. The reverse of this coin features the typical commemorative Charlottetown, Quebec conference design, but the obverse of this piece is incredibly unique. Instead of bearing the effigy of the reigning monarch, as is the norm for circulating Canadian coinage, the face of the obverse on this pattern piece is almost blank, except for a small strange symbol near the center. Now, I wish I could give you guys some more information on the obverse design. I'm not too sure what it represents, but it almost honestly looks like an old Mexican pillar dollar or a counter stamp mark. Either the Canadian Mint was considering the possibility of removing the effigy from the silver dollar, or possibly they just used this to differentiate the trial or pattern 1964 tin dollar. Although this coin is not considered a proof strike, the relief on the reverse design for this coin is much higher than in the standard 1964 silver dollar. This factor, along with the unique obverse, sets it apart and adds to its intrigue and allure in the numismatic world. Now, some of the details and specifications for this coin, if any of these are off at all, it may indicate that this is not a legitimate example. This 1964 tin dollar should have a weight of 26.9 grams and a diameter of 35.5 millimeters. The edge of this coin will actually be plain instead of reeded, which would also be a major visual differentiator and sets it apart from the common issue 1964 silver dollars. As I mentioned previously, the reverse should feature the Charlottetown, Quebec commemorative conference design with a higher relief than the standard issue, and the obverse of this piece should be blank with a small marking or symbol in the center. Usually pattern or trial coins will receive an SP or specimen designation if they were sent off to a reputable grading company such as PCGS or NGC, but there are a few cases like this 1964 tin dollar where it will actually receive the standard MS grade. Charlton Catalogs classifies this coin as DC13, and if you were to find one of these and it scored between an MS63 to MS64, then it can be worth up to $50,000. There are very few known examples of this coin, with one actually being featured in the National Currency Collection. As is the case with most trial or pattern coins, there are usually only a few made, and they are usually disposed of or scooped up pretty quickly by mint employees, but that doesn't mean that you can't find one of these, especially if you are able to find an uncirculated bag or roll of Canadian 1964 silver dollars. It's also a great idea to keep your eyes open on online auctions and sites like eBay, as sometimes people can sell things that they don't always know exactly what they have. There is a chance that someone might think that they have a coin with post-mint damage and can sell this for near silver melt, and if you can pick one of these up and actually identify it as the correct coin, you can make a huge profit. Chances are it's probably going to be a counterfeit if you are buying it off an online auction site or off of a site like Wit. or Alibaba, but at the same time, it is always good to be armed with a little bit of knowledge, especially when you are dealing with coins like this 1964 trial or pattern $10. The 1964 Canadian silver dollars are fairly common issues. They make quite a few of them. I've actually owned many of them myself, so this is definitely a good one to keep your eyes out for, and another incredible coin that deserves its place in the annals of Canadian numismatic history. Now, let's briefly discuss pattern or trial coins. Most pattern essays or trial coins were not officially approved for release, but produced to evaluate a proposed coin design, a new or revised coinage, or to test the metal composition, dies, or structure of a new coin. And when it comes to pattern, trial, and essay coins, usually there will only be a few known examples of the piece, if any, and they usually don't leave the mint facility unless intended, and they are quickly snatched up, graded, and accounted for. I don't want to say that there's a 0% chance that you will ever stumble across one of these in the wild, but if you were, it would definitely be a gift from the coin gods. The thing that makes this coin great, as opposed to some other errors and varieties, is how easy it would be to identify. Silver coins are non-magnetic and nickel coins will stick to a magnet. The thing that makes this 1967 mackerel trial piece so special is that it is actually composed of nickel instead of all the other mackerel dimes which were made of silver that year. This is most likely the result of experimentation by the Canadian Mint to test nickel planchettes, or maybe they planned on releasing some of the commemorative coins in nickel as well, but regardless, it's another great legendary coin to have on your radar. If you do ever happen to have a 1967 mackerel dime that appears like it may not be silver or has a more dull tone, all you have to do is hit it with a magnet, and if it sticks, you have one of the rarest Canadian dimes in existence. Another identifying factor that makes this coin different from its silver counterparts is its weight. This nickel planchette pattern will weigh 2.1 grams, and the silver mackerels should weigh 2.33 grams. There are actually a few other similar cases of coins where the Canadian Mint will experiment and these holy grail pieces are born. One other good example would be the 1967 Bobcat quarter, which is pretty much the exact same case as this dime. It was a pattern or trial piece struck on a nickel planchette, and it can be worth some really good money as well. Some of the details and specifications for this coin: the overall mintage for the 1967 mackerel dime is 32,309,135. The trial pattern piece is composed of 99% nickel. It has a weight of 2.1 grams, a diameter of 18.03 millimeters. It is magnetic. The face value is 10 cents, and it is in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins. Now that we've discussed some of the history and how to identify this coin, what do you say we get into the value of this extremely rare piece of Canadian numismatic history? If you were to ever send this coin in to be graded, it would be classified as a specimen and get an SP designation, as that is the designation most Canadian pattern or trial coins will receive. So as I mentioned earlier on, there are only a few known examples currently for this coin. If you were to find one and it scored an SP63, it would be worth around $3,000. It can be worth around $4,000 for an SP64, and this bad boy can be worth all the way up to $5,000 for an SP65, which, as far as I can tell, is the highest graded known example currently. If you were to ever find one and it scored any higher, you would probably see some pretty big price jumps, and I would not doubt that the price of this coin starts to double, and if it hits around an SP67, it could easily be worth anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000. So even though there is not too many of these known to exist, and very few of them probably left the mint facility, it is definitely still a good one to have on your radar. I have found 1967 mackerel dimes coin roll hunting and in my pocket change before. They are still out there in the wild, and you can definitely fish them out if you keep your eyes open. So to start this off, we need to begin with quite the mouthful, which is Georgius VI Gracia Rex ET India Imperator. Yes, quite the tongue twister, right? Well, this translates to George VI, by the grace of God, King and Emperor of India. Quite the royal title, if I do say so myself. But hold on to your top hats, because this phrase had to go. Why is that, you ask? Well, in the year 1947, India said, cheerio to British rule and gained its independence, becoming the Dominion of India and also the Dominion of Pakistan. During this time, the once mighty British Empire was experiencing a rapid transformation as its colonies sought self-governance and independence. The departure of India from British rule marked a significant turning point in history, symbolizing the end of an era for the empire. Coins were still a necessity though. They decided to produce 1947 dated coins while waiting for the new tools and matrices from the Royal Mint. But here's the twist. They actually added a small maple leaf next to the date to signify that these coins were actually minted in 1948. Very sneaky, eh? A numismatic nod to the changing times. Now, there are very few coins in the world, like the Canadian 1947 dated coins, that have nearly as many varieties. Now, let's talk about the silver dollars. The silver dollars come in two different varieties, the blunt 7 and pointed 7 for the silver dollars, and several other errors or varieties you can look for. And then there are the 1947 1-cent coins or pennies. These exist in two different varieties, the blunt 7 and pointed 7. The blunt 7 is the scarcer of the two in the world of numismatics. Scarcity means value. It's like finding the golden ticket in a sea of regular chocolate bars. Now, the Canadian half dollar does not want to be left out of this 7 party. It also has several different varieties for the 7, the curved left 7, and the curved right 7. These variations in the design of the 7 on these coins may seem insignificant to some, but for collectors, they can make all the difference in determining the value and rarity of a particular coin. The hunt for these unique 7 varieties add an extra layer of excitement and challenge to the world of Canadian coin collecting. Now let's fast forward just a little bit into the year 1948, when the new tools and matrices from London finally arrived and the maple leaf coin's reign came to an end. The new inscription, George Videi Gratia Rex, which stands for King George VI by the grace of God King, took center stage on the obverse of the coin. This is a clear example of how all coins are not created equal. The silver $1 and 50-cent coins from 1948 became unicorns of their time. Why, you ask? Well, those change tools and matrices from London took their sweet time to arrive, and production started fashionably late. It's like waiting for your favorite artist to drop a new album. The anticipation is real. When the coins finally hit circulation, collectors and enthusiasts eagerly sought them out, creating a frenzy in their numismatic community. The scarcity and unique design of these coins made them highly coveted, adding to their allure and value. And finally, we have the piece de resistance of the 1947 series, and those are the small dot varieties. In a sea of maple leaves on some 1947 Canadian nickels and quarters, there it is. A tiny dot, like a period at the end of a numismatic sentence. The cause? Well, it's a bit like a coin's freckle. Nobody knows for sure. Some say it's dye chips, others blame dye deterioration. Either way, it's a quirky and rare minting error that makes collectors' hearts skip a beat. The small dot variety on 1947 Canadian nickels and quarters is a unique minting error that adds an extra layer of intrigue for collectors. Its mysterious cause, resembling a freckle on the coin, only enhances its desirability. This rare and quirky feature truly captivates the hearts of numismatic enthusiasts all over the world. Now, what do you say we get into the specifications and values for the 1947 dot coins, starting with the nickels? The 1947 plain date 5-cent coin has a mintage figure of 7,603,724. The 1947 maple leaf has a mintage of 9,595,124, and the mintage figure for the 1947 5-cent piece is unknown. Some of the specifications for this coin: it is composed of 100% nickel, has a weight of 4.54 grams, it has a diameter of 21.3 millimeters on one side and 20.87 millimeters on the opposite side. The designer and engravers for the coin are T.H. Paget and Thomas Shingles for the obverse, and Thomas Shingles and G.E. Kruger Gray for the reverse. The edge of the coin is smooth, it is magnetic, and it has a diaxis in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins. In terms of value, the 1947 dot nickel actually does carry a premium at the low end. You can expect to get anywhere from $5 to $15 if you have one that is absolutely beat up at the bottom of the Sheldon scale, so that would be considered an AG3. When you get up to the VG8 territory, it is worth around $27.80. and it can be worth all the way up to $165 for an AU50 example. When you start to get into the MS territory, it can be worth around $270 for an MS60. It can be worth $455 for an MS63, and all the way up to $2,850 for an MS66, which is currently the highest graded known example. If you were to find one and it scored a little bit higher, so we are talking MS67, you could easily be talking a $4,000 or $5,000 coin. Now let's get into the 1947 25 cent coin. The mintage figure for the 1947 plain date 25 cent is 1,524,554. The 1947 maple leaf mintage is 4,393,938. And the mintage figure for the 1947 dot quarter is unknown, just like the nickel. The specifications for the Canadian 1947 quarters: it is composed of 80% silver, 20% copper, has a weight of 5.83 grams, a diameter of 23.62 millimeters. It was engraved and designed by T.H. Paget for the obverse and Emmanuel Hahn for the reverse. It has a reeded edge, is non-magnetic, and has a diaxis and metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins. So let's discuss the values for the 1947 dot quarters. This can also have a premium on the low end. It could be worth probably anywhere from $25 to $40 for an AG3, so that is at the absolute bottom of the Sheldon scale. It can be worth around $67.60 for a VG8. It can be worth $394 for an AU50. Now, as we start to get into the MS territory, we start to see some massive price jumps. It can be worth around $624 for an MS60, $1,200 for an MS63, and $4,590 for an MS65, which is currently the highest graded known example. If you were to find one of the 1947 dot quarters and it did score any higher, then you could be sure to see some massive price jumps. We could easily be talking a $15,000, $20,000 coin if it hit the MS67 mark. Now, once again, to identify these coins, basically, you want to look to the bottom right-hand side of the 7 in the date 1947. And if there is a small dot in place of the maple leaf, then you have one of these dot coins. You have to be very thorough because the maple leaf, if it is worn down or faded, can appear like the dot. So you definitely want to get a microscope and check it under there, or at least zoom in very close with your phone. And then you want to get a second opinion before you actually do show it to anyone or try to sell it, because chances are it is probably a 1947 maple leaf, but these things are out there and you do want to know how to identify them and what to look for. From 1935 to 1986, the Voyager dollar was minted in Canada and put into circulation. The coin's composition was 80% silver up until the year 1968, and from 1968 until 1986, a smaller nickel version for widespread circulation was produced. The iconic loonie took the place of the Voyager dollar in 1987. However, the Voyager dollar coins still continue to be valid for use, much like all of Canada's retired coins. Following the 1967 Canadian Centennial Series, the Voyager dollar design was once again used starting in 1968, following the decision to debase Canada's currency system from silver to nickel. The coin was now struck in pure nickel composition. The diameter of the coin was decreased from 36 millimeters to 32 millimeters as a result of the switch to this tougher metal, since it made coin production much simpler. The last time the Voyager dollar was produced for collectors was in the year 1987, and the last time it was produced for circulation was in the year 1986. Now, we should briefly discuss foreign coins that are produced at the Canadian Mint. The Royal Canadian Mint is known for producing coins not only for Canada, but also for a variety of other countries. This practice is often referred to as contract coinage or foreign coin production, and here are some examples of the countries for which the Royal Canadian Mint has struck or produced coins: Bermuda, Barbados, Jamaica, Bahamas, Fiji, Cayman Islands, Trinidad and Tobago, Eastern Caribbean states, Cook Islands, and New Zealand. The Royal Canadian Mint has produced coins for New Zealand, as demonstrated by the 1985 Canadian mule dollar, which was muled with a New Zealand obverse die, which is actually the coin that we are discussing in this video today. These examples demonstrate the international reach and reputation of the Canadian Mint for producing high-quality coins for countries all around the world. The Canadian Mint's involvement in foreign coin production helps these countries create beautifully designed coins and ensures the quality and security of their coinage. Accidentally striking Canadian coins on foreign planchettes is a rare but fascinating occurrence in the world of numismatics. This phenomenon typically happens due to errors or irregulations in the minting process. Here's a brief description of how this can actually occur. The first step is planchette acquisition. The minting process begins with the acquisition of planchettes, which are small, flat, round pieces of metal. Planchettes are typically sourced from specialized suppliers. In most cases, the mint intends to use planchettes made from a specific alloy or composition, such as copper nickel for Canadian coins. Another step is plant inspection. Before the actual minting process begins, planchettes are inspected for quality and composition. This step is crucial to ensuring that the coins produced meet the specified standards. Planchettes that don't meet these standards are typically set aside for melting and recycling. Feeding and presses. Planchettes that pass inspection are fed into the coin presses, where they are struck with the design and details for the coin. Each coin press is set up for a specific denomination and composition, as well as a particular design. Die chambers. Inside the coin press, there are die chambers that house the obverse and reverse designs. These dies have the design and inscriptions that are to be transferred onto the planchette. The dies exert a significant amount of pressure onto the planchette to create the coin's design. Sometimes due to errors or malfunctions in the planchette feeding system, foreign planchettes can find their way into coin presses. These foreign planchettes may have different compositions and designs intended for the coins from other countries. The striking process. When a foreign planchette is inadvertently fed into the press, it goes through the striking process just like a regular planchette. The high pressure from the dies causes the design and details from the Canadian coin dies to be transferred onto the foreign planchette. The result is a Canadian coin with the intended design but struck on this foreign planchette. This creates a unique and rare air coin known as a wrong planchette, or also a mule coin. These coins are often highly sought after by collectors due to their rarity and unusual nature. Now, to be able to identify and differentiate between the regular 1985 and the New Zealand mule, you need to look for the following details. The reverse side of the coin displays a distinctive Canadian design that was commonly featured on the Canadian dollar coins until the year 1987. This design showcases a voyager or a man and a child inside of a canoe, paying homage to Canada's history of exploration and trade. There are no New Zealand motifs or inscriptions on the reverse side of the coin. Now, this error actually occurred at some point during the minting process when the dies intended for the New Zealand $1 coins were mistakenly paired with the Canadian dollar planchettes. This mismatch resulted in a small number of coins with the New Zealand obverse design on one side and the standard Canadian reverse design on the other side of the coin. The Canadian 1985 dollar coin muled with the New Zealand obverse is highly sought after by collectors due to its rarity and intriguing combination of Canadian and New Zealand elements. These air coins are relatively scarce, and their value can vary significantly based on factors such as condition and also collector demand. In good condition, they can command a significant premium over their face value. If you do believe that you have one of these air coins, it is definitely advisable to have it authenticated and graded by a reputable coin grading service such as PCGS or NGC. Professional grading can provide assurance of authenticity, and they also assign a numerical grade based on the 70-point Sheldon scale, which can severely impact the coin's value in the collector market. You also want to be super careful of counterfeit examples of coins like this. If you are buying one of these off of a site like eBay or on an online auction and it is not graded and in a slab, I would definitely be skeptical. You can definitely find coins like this one or even the 1944 tombach and other Canadian air coins that there are counterfeit examples of out there. They are very cheap, only $1 or $2 to buy online, and you can make a huge profit if you only pay $1 or $2 for a coin like that, and then you sell it for the buku dollars that some of these legitimate examples are worth. So you definitely want to do your due diligence. The following specifications are for the 1985 mule dollar. If any of these are off, it might indicate that it is not a legitimate or authentic example. Now, the year on the coin is 1985. The denomination is $1. It is composed of nickel. The weight is 15.6 grams. It has a diameter of 32.1 millimeters. The shape of the coin is round. The edge is reeded. It is magnetic, and the die axis is in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, Australian, and British coins. Even this mule is actually in metal alignment. Now, when it comes to value, I would definitely say that this 1985 mule dollar could be considered a holy grail of the Voyager series from 1968 until 1967. There aren't too many of them that are worth a lot of money, especially over the $1,000 mark, but this is definitely a good one to look for. You can actually go to banks here in Canada and ask them if they have any silver dollars. Sometimes collectors will actually turn their nickel silver dollars in, or someone will inherit a collection and they will turn them into the bank for face value. And then if you are lucky and they happen to have any, you can actually buy them off the bank for face value. I've been able to get close to $100 at one time from a bank in Voyager dollars, and it is definitely a good way to be able to search for errors like this. Now, in terms of value on the low end, it can be worth around $6,400 for an AU50. So even if you found one of these coins and it is beat up and put through the meat grinder, you're going to be talking $500 to $1,000 because it is so rare and struck on a foreign planchette. You just don't come across examples like this too often. Now, when you start getting into the MS region, it can be worth around $9,800 for an MS60 and all the way up to $14,700 for an MS63, which, as we know right now, is the highest graded known example currently. If you were to find one and it scored any higher, you could easily be talking a $25,000 to $50,000 coin, depending on what kind of grade it gets. So what do you say we get into the 1996 beaded mule or test token Toonie, which I would consider to probably be the rarest Canadian Toonie of all time. In the year 1996, there was a Toonie produced with only a few known examples accounted for to this day. This coin is commonly referred to as the beaded Toonie because of the beaded border around the rim. The main difference between this beaded Toonie and the final design of the $2 coin is the presence of a ring of beads on the obverse and reverse of the coin. Only 4 coins with this border are currently known to exist, and it's not entirely clear why they were made, but there are a few theories about why these coins exist. One is they were either an experimental pattern and only a few of these were produced, and another theory is they were an early version of the coin that was later cancelled and most of them were melted down. PCGS classifies it as a trial strike, but there's no evidence to support this. The coin's mysterious origins make it more appealing to collectors. In September of 2021, it sold at auction for $4,700 Canadian with an additional $700 Canadian dollars in fees. This coin has a grade of almost uncirculated and it is worth about $4,100 US dollars. Now this coin could be considered a mule, but it is more widely accepted as a test token. Although PCGS has classified this coin as a test token, there is no historical evidence to support this. It is unclear how many of these coins were released to the public, but only 4 have been certified by PCGS. In terms of rarity, it is probably not only one of the most rare Toonies, but also one of the most valuable and underrated modern Canadian coins you might still have a chance to be able to find in your pocket change, and this variety definitely adds a level of intrigue and spice to coin roll hunting and collecting Toonies here in Canada. Canadian pattern or trial coins are special and unique coins that are created by the Canadian Mint during the design and production process of new currency or coinage changes. They serve as prototypes or test pieces to evaluate various aspects of the coin, including design, metal composition, weight, and durability. These coins are not usually intended for general circulation, but are instead produced for internal purposes and to assess how new coinage will perform. So how do pattern or trial coins come into existence? Well, it begins with the design phase, where artists and engravers create the initial coin design. This design may undergo several revisions to ensure that it meets artistic, historical, and also technical standards. The Canadian Mint experiments with different metal compositions to assess their durability for circulation. This involves variations in the alloy mix and also the surface finishes, such as matte or proof-like. Once a design and metal composition are selected, a small number of trial coins are minted using specialized equipment. These coins then undergo rigorous quality control to ensure that they meet the Mint standards. The trial coins are then subjected to extensive testing, including durability assessments and also wear resistance checks. This step is crucial to ensure that the new coinage will withstand the demands of circulation. Mint officials and experts review the trial coins and assess whether they meet all necessary criteria. Any adjustments or modifications are made as needed, and after approval, the Mint can proceed with mass production of the approved coin design, which eventually enters general circulation. Now, what is the possibility of finding these coins in your pocket change? While the chance of finding Canadian pattern or trial coins in your pocket change is exceedingly rare, These coins are never intended for general circulation, and they are usually retained by the Canadian Mint for reference purposes, archive collections, or occasionally offered to collectors during special events. Collectors, numismatists, and historians are the primary seekers of Canadian pattern and trial coins. These coins hold significant historical and numismatic value due to their unique designs, metal composition, and also the insights they offer into the coinage development process. If you ever come across a coin that looks unusual or different from standard circulation coins, it's at least worth having examined by an expert or professional numismatist, as it could potentially be a rare pattern or trial coin. In the year 1936, following the death of King George V, the Canadian Mint decided to change the reverse designs for all of the Canadian coin denominations except for the half dollar and the dollar. The Mint also needed to create coinage that featured the new monarch King George VI portrait. Renowned Canadian coin designer Thomas Shingles was tasked with creating these new designs. For the obverse of the coin, Thomas Shingles crafted a portrait of King George VI. This portrait had to be both artistically compelling and representative of the new monarch. It went through several iterations and reviews before being finalized. Simultaneously, new reverse designs for various denominations were also being developed. These new reverse designs aimed to depict Canadian symbols, flora, and fauna. For example, the nickel featured a beaver and the quarter a caribou. These designs aimed to celebrate Canada's natural heritage. Once the designs were finalized, trial coins were minted for testing and review. These trial coins went through rigorous quality control and assessments to ensure that they met both artistic and technical standards. Creating an accurate and detailed portrait of King George VI was a challenge. His likeness had to be both faithful to the king's image and artistically appealing. Achieving this balance required great skill. Transitioning from one set of coin designs to another on a large scale was logistically challenging. The Canadian Mint had to retool its machinery and processes to accommodate the new designs efficiently. There was a concern that the public might not immediately recognize the new designs, leading to confusion in everyday transactions. To address this, educational campaigns were launched to familiarize Canadians with the new coins. Coin collectors and numismatists alike eagerly awaited these new designs. The Canadian Mint had to ensure that these collectors had access to the new coins while maintaining adequate supplies for everyday circulation. The transition itself was of historical significance, marking the change in Canadian monarchy from King George V to King George VI. This transition was documented and commemorated on some coins. The process of transitioning Canadian coin designs from King George V to King George VI in 1936 to 1937 involved meticulous design work, rigorous testing, and adjustments to production processes. Challenges included ensuring the accuracy of the king's portrait, preparing for mass production, and also educating the public about the new designs. This transition not only affected the aesthetics of Canadian coins, but also marked an important moment in Canadian history. So during this experimental and tumultuous time at the Canadian Mint, several trial pieces were issued for all of the denominations except for the dollar. It's very interesting to note the composition change the Mint was testing for the new circulation coinage, as well as a different orientation for the die axis. Canadian coins will usually come in metal alignment, meaning the obverse and reverse are both lined up facing the same way. When these test pieces were being issued, with the exception of a test quarter that was kept in metal alignment, all of the other denominations were struck in coin alignment, meaning the obverse and reverse were rotated 180 degrees. This could have been in an attempt to make Canadian coinage more similar to our American coin neighbors to the south. Coins in the United States are typically struck in coin alignment, and after Canada changed the 1 and 5 cent coins to nearly identical size and specs to their American counterparts, it wouldn't surprise me if they were experimenting with changing the die axis as well to be more similar to United States coinage. By doing this, it would have somewhat set a standard for North American coins, but eventually Canada decided to keep our coins in metal alignment, which was more in keeping with British and Australian coinage. So all of that being said, what do you say we get into the value and specifications for these Holy Grail trial or pattern coins? As I mentioned earlier, chances are that not too many of these, if any, made it out of the mint. And if they did make it out, it was most likely by accident or because they were smuggled out of the mint. But just because there are only a few known examples of a coin doesn't mean there aren't any of that piece in circulation. If you look at the 1943 and 1944 copper and steel Lincoln cents, Hundreds of those coins were produced, some even at different mint locations, and the United States Mint is not any more renowned for their quality control than the Canadian Mint. So if legendary pennies like those can slip through the cracks and make their way into our pocket change, I don't see any reason why these coins couldn't be discovered one day as well. So I'm going to go through each of the coins and give you the specs because they are a little different for each of the different denominations. You definitely want to do your due diligence and make sure all of these specs are bang on, and if any of them are not, then it may not be legitimate. You might ask why someone would counterfeit coins like this, but if you go on sites like Wish or eBay and some of the online shopping marketplaces, you can find oodles of different counterfeit coins from every country and walk of life, and usually, to be honest, it will be coins like these that will be the most reproduced. So first, I will give you guys the specifications, and then I will give you the value for each of the denominations as we go through. So first is the 1937 trial or pattern 1 cent coin. Now this coin is composed of brass. It has a weight of 3.1 grams, a diameter of 19.1 millimeters. The die axis is in coin alignment, and all of these coins will receive SP grades, which is the specimen designation. Even though they are trial or pattern pieces, they are not intended for circulation, so that is why they are given the specimen grade. But in terms of value, this is an incredibly rare coin that can be worth up to $20,000 for an SP65 example. Next up, we have the 1937 5-cent trial or pattern piece. This coin is composed of brass. It has a weight of 4.98 grams, a diameter of 21.5 millimeters. The die axis is in coin alignment. In terms of value, you're going to find a lot of these coins have very similar values. They can all be worth around $10,000 for an SP62 example, so probably around $5,000 for an SP60, but it can be worth all the way up to $20,000 for an SP65 example, and that is for the 1937 5-cent pattern piece. Next up, we have the 1937 10-cent pattern or trial coin. It is composed of brass. It has a weight of 2.46 grams, a diameter of 18.3 millimeters. The die axis is in coin alignment, and in terms of value, it can be worth around $10,000 for an SP62 and all the way up to $20,000 for an SP65. Now, in the year 1937, they actually issued 2 different trial or pattern coins for the Canadian 25-cent piece. One of them is in coin alignment, another is in metal alignment, and they are actually composed of different alloys as well. Now, first, we'll start off with the 25-cent pattern or trial that is coded DC22. It is composed of brass. It has a weight of 6.1 grams, a diameter of 23.9 millimeters. The edge of the coin is reeded, and it has a die axis in coin alignment, just like the other patterns or trials that we covered previously. In terms of value, this one is pretty similar to the other ones on the list. It can be worth around $10,000 for an SP62 and all the way up to $20,000 for an SP65 example. And then we have the second variation of the 25-cent pattern trial piece from 1937. This one is coded DC24. It is actually composed of bronze. The other one was composed of brass. This one has an alloy composition of bronze. It has a weight of 5.5 grams, a diameter of 23.6 millimeters. The edge of the coin is reeded. Now, something very interesting to note is that the die axis for this quarter is actually in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins and also British and Australian. So that is how you tell this one apart. This is the DC24 variant. And in terms of value, it has just about the same value as all of the other coins on this list, worth around $10,000 for an SP62 and all the way up to $20,000 for an SP65. And then we come to the last of these holy grail SA pattern or trial coins, whatever you like to refer to them as. They can get any of those designations or labels, but this is the 50-cent piece, and it is the most valuable and also rarest of the bunch. Now, the 50-cent 1937 pattern SA or trial coin is composed of brass. It has a weight of 14.9 grams, a diameter of 30 millimeters. The edge of the coin is reeded. The die axis is in coin alignment. And in terms of value, this one can be worth around $40,000 for an SP63 and all the way up to $60,000 for an SP65. So worth about 3 times as much as the other denominations. This is the one that you want to look for, but unfortunately, 50-cent coins are not circulated here in Canada anymore. The only way that you can ever really get them from the bank is if somebody turns them in and then you get lucky and go there on the day or maybe week that somebody turned them in and the tellers are nice enough to turn them over to you. And then the chances of having one of these Holy Grail coins inside of that bag is pretty much slim to nil, but never say never. Crazier things have happened. And if you keep your eyes open and you know what to look for, your chances of being able to find and identify these coins is definitely a lot better than not knowing anything about them or having them on your radar. Now, 1968 was the last year for silver circulation coins in Canada, but about half of the 1968 dimes and quarters were made out of the new intended metal nickel. All of the 1967 Bobcat or Lynx quarters were produced in silver, but unknown to some, there's an extremely rare Holy Grail variety of these coins that can be worth insane money. Some of the 1967 Bobcat quarters were accidentally struck with nickel planchettes. It is unclear how many, but it is estimated that there are only 5 to 10 of these coins still in existence. One of these coins, which was certified by PCGS with a grade of specimen 64, was sold by Heritage Auctions in 2019. This may be the only certified example of this coin. Being able to tell the difference between the silver and nickel Bobcat should be pretty easy, as the nickel planchette would be magnetic and the silver would not. There are not any notable varieties for the 1967 coins, but if you guys are familiar at all with the 1967 rabbit nickel or the 1967 goose dollar, there are a few notable varieties for those, mostly rotated die varieties, and also sometimes they can have machine doubling, most notably on the 1967 pennies. So I would always keep my eye open for errors on the 1967 coins. They produced a lot of them and they had to pump them out in a short amount of time. So the specifications for the regular 1967 Canadian quarter, if any of these are off, it might indicate that you have the nickel planchette as well. Now, the alloy is supposed to be 80% silver and 20% copper, or it can come in a 50% silver or 50% copper composition. The weight is 5.83 grams. It has a diameter of 23.88 millimeters. The edge is reeded. It is non-magnetic and it has a die axis in metal alignment. Now, what do you say we get into the values for the 1967 nickel planchette Holy Grail quarter? I'm sure you are all curious. Now, just to give you guys an idea, of a regular 1967 Bobcat is worth about $350 in a low MS grade, not worth much more than melt or scrap, but it can be worth all the way up to $77 for an MS65. If you were to get a cameo designation, it may add a premium as well. Canadian 1967 coins were also released in proof-like and specimen sets, and the Canadian nickel planchette Bobcat quarter actually has a specimen designation, meaning that most of them were probably pulled out of specimen sets. Most of the Canadian specimen coins and sets produced before the year 1970 are extremely rare and valuable, but Canadian 1967 specimen sets are not quite as rare as the other ones produced before the year 1970. The pro is they did come with a gold coin, and if you purchased it back in the day, it was not a whole lot of money to buy the set and you would have made a huge profit. But if you want to buy the set with the gold coin, you're looking at least $1,500 to $2,000, especially if you are actually paying gold value for the coin itself. But the other commemorative coins inside of the set are not that rare. The only way the other coins in the 1967 specimen sets can have an extreme premium is if they come with a very nice cameo on them. But a lot of the times the coins were toned in an undesirable way, which takes some of the value away from them. But just to give you guys an idea, the 1967 Canadian proof-like Bobcat quarter, the proof-like sets are very common as well. Usually you can pick those up for pretty close to spot price, but it's worth around $6.60 for a proof-like 63 example, so not worth much more than melt, and it's worth around $44.10 for a proof-like 66 example. And then we have the regular specimen 1967. Now this is worth around $8 for an MS63. It can be worth all the way up to $47 in the high SP range. And it is not super valuable. If it gets that cameo attribution, it might add a slight premium, but they are not super rare for the proof-like and specimen 1967 Bobcat quarters. But last but not least, we have the extremely rare Holy Grail 1967 Bobcat quarter struck on a nickel planchette. Now the only example we know that is graded currently is an SP64, and it sold for $3,800 US in 2019 in Heritage Auctions. That is some crazy buku money, and it is a good variety to look for. Even though they're in specimen sets, you never know if one of these maybe made their way into circulation. And if you are an avid collector and you like to visit coin shops or flea markets, definitely keep your eyes out for 1967 specimen sets, and you can probably tell the Bobcat quarter apart from the others because the others will be in silver composition, and I'm sure the Bobcat quarter will look a lot more dull than those ones. The penny was minted in Canada from the year 1858 until the year 2012. It is a coin that is no longer in circulation and is worth 1 cent or 1/100th of a dollar. Although the 1 cent piece is the coin's official name, according to the Royal Canadian Mint, the names penny and cent are more frequently used. Because Canada had used British pounds, shillings, and pence as coinage alongside American decimal coins and also Spanish milled dollars up until the year 1858, the penny was quickly embraced by the Canadian public. The loanword cent is frequently used in Canadian French to refer to the penny. This maintains the English sound in contrast to the word that means 100 in French. Although sou is the preferred term for penny in Quebec, French slang phrases like sen and sen noir are still acceptable. The Royal Canadian Mint officially stopped distributing pennies as of February 4th, 2013 after the coin's production ended in May of 2012. This coin is still considered a valid form of payment. However, when the coin's circulation ended, merchants were urged to round cash purchases to the nearest 5 cents rather than continue to give out pennies as change for cash transactions. Non-cash transactions like credit cards are paid to the exact cent, as well as goods which are also priced in 1 cent increments. The first Canadian cent was produced in the year 1858 and measured 1 inch or 25.4 millimeters in diameter and approximately 4.54 grams in weight. Prior to 1858, the Canadian monetary system relied heavily on British coinage, bank, and commercial tokens, known by their French name as sous. Also US cash and Spanish milled dollars. These cents were initially established to bring some sort of order to the monetary system in Canada. With the goal of using these coins as measurement tools, the coin parameters were determined, and the public's acceptance of these tokens was severely hampered by their small weight when compared to the easily accessible bank and merchant halfpenny tokens of the time. The Dominion Government of Canada inherited the coins in 1867, and some of them were even sold at a discount of 20%. It wasn't until 1876 that the need for new cents with the weight increased to 5.67 grams became apparent. The diameter of a large cent from 1858 to 1920 was 23.88 millimeters or 0.940 inches, making them much larger than contemporary 1 cent coins and even much larger than contemporary 25-cent pieces of the time. These enormous large cent coins, which were produced after Confederation on British halfpenny planchettes, were issued and worth about the same value as the halfpenny. After being issued, they were in use in the province of Canada, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. Prior to that time, British Columbia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland all continued to mint their own pennies until they joined Confederation. Eventually, the size of the penny was shrunk to its current size in the year 1920, making it more comparable to the American penny. Now, before we get into how to identify and value this coin if you were ever to find one, let's go over pattern or trial coins. Canadian pattern or trial coins are unique and rare coin prototypes created as part of the coin design and production process. They were minted to test new designs, metals, or production techniques before the mass production of regular circulation coins. These coins often feature experimental or alternate designs, inscriptions, or metal compositions. Some of the key features that can identify Canadian pattern or trial coins: they can have unique designs. Pattern coins frequently showcase unique or experimental designs that differ from the final versions of the coins issued for circulations. These designs may include variations in motifs, inscriptions, or even entirely new themes. They can also have a limited mintage. Pattern coins were often struck in very limited quantities, making them scarce and highly sought after by collectors. The low mintage figures adds to their rarity and value. They can be composed of various metals. Some pattern coins were struck in different metals or alloys, testing their durability and also appearance. These may include variations in copper, silver, gold, bronze, and other metals. They may have distinguishing markings. Pattern coins often bear distinguishing markings to indicate their experimental nature. Modern pattern coins can also include the words pattern or trial or test on the coin's surface. Historical significance. These coins provide valuable insights into the coinage development process, the evolution of designs, and also the decision-making of mint authorities. They are a window into the history of Canadian coinage. And also their collectible rarity. Collectors of Canadian coins value pattern coins for their historical significance and rarity. The value of these coins can vary widely based on factors such as the specific design, metal composition, condition, and also collector demand. Authenticity is also crucial when purchasing pattern coins, as counterfeit or replica pieces do exist. Now, to differentiate between the regular strike and the pattern 1911 Canadian large cent or penny, you need to flip over and look on the coin's obverse. The pattern or trial piece will include the inscription George 5th DEIGRA REX ETIND In contrast, the regular strike of the 1911 Canadian penny will not include the GRA, which stands for By the Grace of God in Latin in the inscription. It may be shocking that such a minor difference can bring such a substantial value and premium to this coin, but if you understood how rare this penny truly is, you might understand why people are willing to pay such buku amounts of money for one of these bad boys. Currently, there are only a few known examples of this coin, and they will receive the SP or specimen designation. Usually that is the designation that pattern or trial pieces will receive from PCGS. At this point, coming across large Canadian pennies or cents to search for errors or variations doesn't happen too often, even for those with some experience in collecting and coin roll hunting. But if you do want the opportunity to search some large pennies for holy grails like this 1911 pattern piece, I would suggest your best chance at this point would probably be to look for bulk lots on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, or even a flea market. Generally, coin shops will charge around $1 for an average condition large penny, so if you can find a bulk lot where you pay less than $1 per coin, you are not doing too bad. This 1911 pattern penny was produced at the Royal Mint facility in London, and because the obverse design was changing to accommodate the coronation of King George V, there were several tests conducted and many legendary coins were created, the most noteworthy of which would probably be this coin's big brother, the 1911 silver dollar, which is commonly acknowledged and referred to as the most rare and valuable Canadian coin currently in existence. So what do you say we discuss the specifications and potential value if you were ever to stumble across one of these legendary pennies? If any of the specifications are off, it may indicate that the coin is not legitimate or authentic. The 1911 pattern penny is composed of a bronze alloy which is 95% copper, 4% tin, and 1% zinc. It has a weight of 5.6 grams, a diameter of 25.4 millimeters, and is in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, to identify this 1911 pattern piece, all you need to do is flip over to the obverse, and if it has the GRA, then you have one extremely rare Canadian penny that can be worth all the way up to $60,000 for an SP65. If you were ever to find one of these and sent it to PCGS to be graded, it would receive the SP or specimen designation. Currently, the highest graded known example is an SP65, but I'm going to give you the North Central Coins estimate. If you were able to find and identify one of these 1911 pattern pennies, I believe that it could truly be worth up to $100,000 for an SP67 example. So this coin, even on the lower end, is probably worth around $10,000. And as you start to go up into the MS range, you start to see some crazy money where it tops out at $60,000 for an SP65 example. The transition from small silver 5-cent coins to the larger nickel 5-cent coins in Canada took place in the year 1922. Here is a brief explanation of the process and some of the reasons behind this switch. The original 5-cent coin in Canada, which was introduced in 1858, was made of silver. However, during World War I, there was a shortage of silver due to increased demand for the metal in various industries, including the war effort. In response to the silver shortage, the Canadian Mint eventually decided to change the composition of the 5-cent coin. The new coins were made of a pure nickel alloy, which became known as the iconic nickel coin, similar to the American counterparts. The first Canadian nickel 5-cent coin was minted in the year 1922. Now, some of the reasons for this switch from the small silver 5-cent coin to the larger nickel. First, cost considerations. The primary reason for the switch from the silver to nickel was cost related. Nickel was more abundant and less expensive than silver. This change allowed the mint to continue producing the 5-cent coin at a lower cost. Metal availability. The shortage of silver during and after World War I made it impractical to continue using silver for everyday coinage. Nickel, being more readily available, provided a practical alternative. Standardization. The move to a nickel alloy for the 5-cent coin aligned with international trends. Several countries were transitioning to nickel and other base metal compositions for their lower denomination coins, and the United States had already had a similar sized nickel in circulation for several years. Public acceptance. While there might have been initial resistance or curiosity about the new nickel coins, the public quickly adapted to the change, and the nickel 5-cent coin became widely accepted in everyday transactions. The first large nickel 5-cent coins that were minted in 1922 featured a new design to distinguish them from the smaller silver coins. Phasing out the silver coins. The transition involved phasing out the small silver 5-cent coins from circulation. Over time, as the new nickel coins were introduced, the older silver coins were gradually removed from circulation. Adjustment period. The introduction of the new coin design usually requires an adjustment period in terms of the production processes, die preparation, and other technical aspects. This adjustment period can result in lower mintages during the initial years. Public reception and acceptance of a new coin design can affect demand. If there's initial skepticism or resistance to the new design, it may result in lower demand and consequently lower mintage figures. Also, technical issues, maintenance, or other challenges at the minting facilities can lead to lower production during certain years. Mintages are often planned based on anticipated demand. If there's a miscalculation in demand projection, or if the mint prioritizes other denominations, it can result in lower mintages for specific years. Collectors may actively hoard coins from the first year of a new design, further reducing the available supply and circulation. Over time, coins may be removed from circulation due to wear or, in some cases, melted down for their metal content. This reduction in the available supply can contribute to the rarity for specific years. Also, significant political or social events may divert resources or attention away from coin production, which can also affect mintages. Now, the key date and most desirable Canadian nickel that you can look for without any errors or varieties in the King George V series is the 1925. There are few other nickels from this date range that can be worth really good money, but this is one that most collectors have on their radar and one of the most infamous of the early Canadian nickels. Now, this is a coin that I know for sure has counterfeit examples floating around out there, so if you were ever to find one in good condition at this point, I would be highly skeptical of its legitimacy, but that's not saying there aren't a few of these still floating around in the vast oceans of circulation. Now, the reason that this coin is so rare stems from its incredibly low mintage figure, meaning that not many of these coins were produced, and even less of them are around and accounted for in this day and age. Now, some of the details and specifications for the 1925 Canadian nickel, if any of these are off, it might indicate that the coin is not authentic. So first, the mintage figure for the 1925 Canadian King George V nickel is 200,050. Now, having a mintage figure that low and only being somewhere around 100 years old, it's actually 99 years old as I am making this video, it only adds to the allure and rarity of this nickel. If this was a United States nickel that only had a mintage of 200,000, I can assure you that it'd be worth a whole heck of a lot more than this one. So this definitely has the potential to increase in value over time. You just don't see coins with a mintage figure as low as 200,050. That is just redonkulous. Now, some of the specifications for this coin: it is composed of 100% nickel. It has a weight of 4.54 grams, a diameter of 21.21 millimeters. The coin was designed and engraved by Sir E.B. McKennell for the obverse and W.H.J. Blakemore for the reverse of the coin. The edge is smooth, it is not magnetic, and it has a diaxis in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, British, and Australian coins. Now, when it comes to the value for the 1925 Canadian nickel, this is one that Canadian coin roll hunters always have on their radar. I still have not found one to this day, but never say never. I'm definitely going to pick up some more nickel boxes eventually and do a few more hunts and see if maybe I can get a little bit of luck and score one of these bad boys. But I know they are incredibly rare, and you probably will be finding extra water lines and crazy stuff like that before you even find a key date like this. But even if you find one of these on the low end, they can hold a premium. Even if you find one and it's beat up and worn and been put through the meat grinder, it can be worth around $72 for a VG8. So that isn't right at the bottom, but it is almost at the bottom of the Sheldon scale. So $70 for a common circulation nickel that you could find in your pocket change or in a coin roll. That ain't too bad if you ask me. Now, as we start to go up in condition, it can be worth around $694 for an AU50 example, around $1,890 for an MS60, $5,300 for an MS63, and all the way up to $17,600 for an MS65 of the 1925 Canadian nickel. So that is a whole lot of money. Chances are if you did find one and it was in a really good condition, it is probably a counterfeit. You can buy these things off AliExpress and eBay and Amazon, so you definitely want to get a second opinion and make sure it is legitimate before you do invest and send it off to be graded. In the annals of numismatic history, amidst the clinking of coins and the hum of minting machinery, there exists a narrative both captivating and mysterious, a tale that transcends borders and mingles the essence of two nations' coinage. Enter the Canadian 2000 Toonie struck on a United States Sacagawea dollar planchette, a numismatic anomaly that emerged from an unforeseen partnership between the Canadian Mint and the United States Mint, weaving together a saga rich in intrigue, collaboration, and fascination. The Sacagawea golden dollar, minted by the United States Mint from the years 2000 to 2008, was a groundbreaking coin, featuring an outer layer of manganese brass that gave it a distinctive golden hue. Its obverse depicted Sacagawea, the Shoshone Indian guide of a historic Lewis and Clark expedition, while the reverse showcased a soaring eagle. Sacagawea's role as a guide and the interpreter during the expedition, despite her young age and pregnancy, was crucial to its success, earning her lasting admiration. The coin's design selection process involved significant public participation, with the Dollar Coin Design Advisory Committee ultimately recommending Sacagawea's image. Sculptor Glenna Goodacre's design was unveiled at the White House in May 1999, capturing Sacagawea's likeness and commemorating her invaluable contributions to American history. This coin's release marked a significant moment in numismatic history, honoring Sacagawea's legacy and celebrating the spirit of exploration and unity. Set against the backdrop of the turn of the millennium, where the dawn of a new era beckoned, the United States Mint embarked on a monumental endeavor: the introduction of this Sacagawea dollar. As minting activity reached unprecedented heights, the Royal Canadian Mint, renowned for its precision and ingenuity, extended a helping hand to its American counterpart, forging a unique bond of collaboration in the realm of coinage, and this was not the first time that our countries collaborated or assisted each other. I have said many times that American and Canadian coins share a symbiotic relationship, and even though in most cases Canadian coins are compared and more similar to their British or Australian counterparts, it can't be denied that Canada drew heavy inspiration from the American money system. There have been other instances, like in the year 1968, where the United States Mint actually took over production of some of the Canadian dimes to help relieve some of the pressure on production when they were switching metal compositions from silver to nickel alloy that year. These dimes can be distinguished by inspecting the reading along the outside of the coin. I have actually covered the Philadelphia Mint 1968 dimes in a previous video. If you guys would like to check that out, I'll leave a link for that in the top corner. In this remarkable display of cooperation, the Canadian Mint supplied not only planchettes for the 5-cent coins in the year 2000, but also for the Sacagawea dollars, offering invaluable support to alleviate the production constraints faced by the United States Mint during this pivotal moment in numismatic history. However, amidst the flurry of minting activity, fate intervened in unexpected ways, unveiling a peculiar twist in this tale. Amidst the vast production volume exceeding 1.25 billion pieces between Philadelphia and Denver, a subtle yet significant alteration emerged. In a remarkable twist of fate, Canadian 2000 Toonie was discovered struck on a United States $1 Sacagawea planchette. This coin is a testament to the relationship of the two nations in the realm of numismatics, where borders are blurred and coins transcend their intended identities. The occurrence of the planchette mix-up during the minting process is a rare but plausible phenomenon that can take place due to various factors within the minting environment. In the case of the Canadian 2000 Toonie struck on a United States Sacagawea dollar planchette, the mix-up likely occurred due to a combination of logistical, mechanical, and also human factors. The minting process involves the handling of large quantities of planchettes, which are the blank metal discs used for coin production. These planchettes are typically sourced from suppliers and transported to the minting facility. During transit or storage, there is a possibility of planchettes intended for one coin type getting mixed up for those intended for another. Within the minting facility, the planchettes undergo a series of mechanical processes, including feeding into the coin presses and being struck with the coin dies. Despite stringent quality control measures, mechanical errors can occur, leading to planchettes intended for one denomination or design inadvertently being fed into coin presses set up for another. While minting operations are highly automated, human intervention is still required at various stages of the process. This includes loading planchettes into the hoppers, monitoring the operation of the coin presses, and conducting quality checks on finished coins. Human errors such as mislabeling or misidentifying planchette batches could contribute to planchette mix-ups during production. In some cases, minting facilities may produce coins for multiple countries or denominations simultaneously. This can lead to overlaps in production schedules and processes, increasing the likelihood of planchette mix-ups if the proper precautions are not taken to segregate and track different batches of planchettes. Now, as far as I can tell, there are only a few known examples of this coin accounted for currently, but that doesn't mean that you can't get lucky and find one of these in the wilds of circulation, especially if you coin roll hunt toonies on the regular. In the year 2010, an MS66 graded example of this coin sold for $9,000. One of the more recent noted sales of this coin, an MS64 example, sold in the year 2014 for an impressive $6,000. So even if you did find one of these and it's not in the greatest shape, it's pretty beat up, worn, and been put through the meat grinder, you're still probably going to be able to get a couple $100s for this coin. It is not too often that you stumble across planchette errors when it comes to coin roll hunting or coin collecting, and when it comes to a more modern denomination like the Canadian Toonie, you can be sure it will probably bring a premium along with the coin. So first, let's give you guys some information so you have some context on how this coin came into existence. In the year 1967, the rising price of silver forced a reduction in the silver content in Canadian 10 and 25-cent coins from 80% to 50% composition, although some coins were still minted in 80% during that year. 1967 and 1968 are considered transitional years for the amount of silver commonly used in Canadian coins, and the composition was eventually changed to pure nickel in the year 1968, with around a third of the dimes and quarters being composed of 50% silver for that final year. The transition from silver to nickel composition in Canadian coins during the years 1967 and 1968 was a significant change in the country's currency. This shift marked a move towards a more cost-effective and durable material for coin production. This ultimately impacted the value and collectability of these coins for numismatists. This was a very experimental and tumultuous time at the Canadian Mint, and there was also a very heavy workload, as the full run of 1967 commemorative coins was no doubt a huge undertaking in the years prior, and working during this time must have been a strain on Mint employees. To help relieve some of this pressure, some of the Canadian 10-cent coins produced in the year 1968 were actually struck at the Philadelphia Mint in the United States. These are distinguishable from the Canadian dimes by looking at the width of the grooves along the outside reading of the coin. The dimes struck in the United States will have wider and more squared notches, and the Canadian dimes will be more narrow and angled. The Philadelphia dimes are considered to be the more rare of the two varieties, but neither the silver nor nickel 1968 dimes are exceptionally valuable. However, in the year 1969, a production mishap occurred during the creation of the Canadian dimes. resulting in an error in the matrices. By mistake, a portion of the coins produced had the large date feature instead of the intended small date. Since multiple coins are struck simultaneously by various machines, a mixture of both large date and small date coins emerged. Presently, there are around 20 confirmed instances of these error coins, but it is believed that there are still around 20 to 30 out in circulation that remain undiscovered. To identify this coin, you have to look at the date on the reverse of the coin. I will show an example of what both the small and large dates look like, but what I highly suggest is that if you find a Canadian dime from the year 1968, hold on to it, because the date on the 1968 dime was only struck in the large size and the size of the numerals was reduced the following year, or at least so we thought. So if you compare the size of the date on your 1969 dime and the size looks similar to the date on the 1968, then you may have yourself a Holy Grail coin. The examples of this coin that have been discovered are usually not in the greatest condition and at best are barely pushing mint state. If you were ever to find a legitimate example of one of these and it scored higher in the MS range, it could easily be one of the most valuable Canadian coins of all time. Though there are only few known examples, it is very rare that an actual estimate exists for the amount of Holy Grail coins that could still be found floating around in the wilds of circulation. And this is one where if you hunt dimes regularly, you can definitely validate the lack of other good stuff to look for. So now that we've given you some information on how this coin came into existence and how to identify it, what do you say we discuss the specifications and potential value? The specifications of the 1969 large date dime should be exactly the same as the 1969 small date, except for the size of the numerals on the date. It is composed of 100% nickel. It has a weight of 2.07 grams, a diameter of 18.03 millimeters, a thickness of 1.16 millimeters. The obverse was designed by Arnold Maughan and Myron Cook. The reverse was designed by Emmanuel Hahn and Myron Cook. The edge of the coin is reeded, it is magnetic, and the die axis is in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian coins. So let's get into the values for the 1969 large date dime. First, just to give you an idea in comparison, the highest graded known example of the 1969 currently is an AU50, which is just before the MS mark. As I mentioned earlier, if you were to find one of these and it did score anywhere in the mid-MS range, this would be an incredibly rare and valuable Canadian dime that could easily be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. And one of the best things about this 1969 large date dime is it is not actually that old. I have found 1970 nickels, dimes, quarters that are in a high mint state, so your chance of being able to find one of these and it's in decent condition aren't the worst ever. Hopefully someone didn't find one of these and bash it with a hammer not knowing what it is, but you never know. To find one of these even at the absolute bottom of the Sheldon scale would be a nice little treat. So just to give you guys an idea of value, the 1969 small date can be worth up to 20 cents for an AU50, which is 2 times its face value. It can be worth a couple dollars when it starts to hit the MS region. It can be worth $10, $20 when it starts to hit around an MS 65. Now, when it comes to the 1969 large date, on the very bottom end of the Sheldon scale, it is worth $11,300 for an F12. So that is not the absolute bottom. The absolute bottom of the Sheldon scale is an about good or a good, which is a 3 or 4 out of the 70-point system. But an F12 is still pretty low, not the greatest shape ever, that is for sure. And you're still getting over $10,000 for this dime. Now, on the high end, one of the highest graded known examples is an AU50, and it can be worth around $21,200 for an AU50 example. And as I mentioned earlier on, it is estimated that somewhere around 20 or 30 of these are still floating around in the wilds of circulation. So I suggest that you guys, if you have your piggy banks, you go bust it open, look through your dimes, because if you were to find one of these and it has been through the meat grinder, you can still make over $10,000. So definitely a good one to have on your radar and to keep your eyes out for, whether you're sifting through your pocket change or you are coin roll hunting. Now, what do you say we get into the coin that we all came here for, the king of Canadian coins, or the king of silver dollars, as it is commonly referred to as? The 1948 King George VI Canadian dollar is an extremely highly sought after coin in Canadian numismatics. It is the rarest and most valuable regular issue coin in the series of Canadian silver dollars minted from 1935 to 1967. This coin has an extremely limited mintage and holds a significant place in Canadian coin history. The 1948 silver dollar looks similar, if not identical, to the other King George VI silver dollar coins of the era, except for the date 1948 is the only thing that makes it stand out and adds the value to the coin. It only has a silver content of 80%. It is not even made of sterling silver like some of the earlier Canadian coinage. The obverse of the coin was designed by T.H. Paget, while its reverse was designed by Emmanuel Hahn and features a Canadian voyager and Native American cruising in a canoe under the northern lights on an evergreen traced lake. However, there is one minor and important change that affected the 1948 Canadian dollars. Production of the Canadian dollar was suspended in the year 1940 due to Canada's involvement in World War II. When the war ended in 1945, there was social upheaval and brewing in India, which was still under British rule. India gained independence on August 15, 1947, which affected the production of Canadian dollars. The new dies reflecting India's independence had not yet been prepared at the Royal Canadian Mint, so production of 1947 dated coinage continued into the year 1948, with those predated silver dollars containing that small maple leaf to the bottom right-hand side of the 7. Now, although the 1947 Canadian silver dollars can be extremely rare and valuable depending on which variety you have and also the grade, the Canadian Mint didn't start producing silver dollars with the date of 1948 until about halfway through the year. Also, once they received the new equipment and dies to start producing the new coins, there was a delay in production which affected the overall number of coins made. Only 18,780 1948 Canadian silver dollars were ever produced, including a few special coins made in specimen sets as well. Even coins that have been circulated or scrubbed with steel wool are extremely rare and can still fetch $1,000 today, even in the worst conditions. So some of the specifications for this coin, if any of these are off, it might indicate that it is a counterfeit. When a coin is usually this rare and has such a limited mintage, it will usually be pretty common for counterfeits to be produced, and I can guarantee you there has been a fair number of 1948 Canadian silver dollar counterfeits produced over the years. If they're pumping out the Canadian Toonie in counterfeits, then they have definitely made a few of these and tried to pass them off and sell them at coin shops or maybe pawn shops over the years. But the specifications for the 1948 Canadian silver dollar, it is composed of 80% silver. It has a portrait of King George VI on the obverse of the coin. It should have a weight of 23.33 grams, a diameter of 36.06 millimeters, a thickness of 2.8 millimeters. It is in metal alignment like all Canadian coins come. The shape is round and the edge is reeded. Now let's discuss the values for what has to be definitely one of the most valuable silver dollars, not only in Canada, but the entire world. This can be worth a lot of money, even on the low end. The 1948 Canadian silver dollar can fetch you a minimum of $588 if it scores a VG8, which is basically the bottom of the Sheldon scale. So that is a coin that has seen a fair amount of wear and circulation and has been put through the meat grinder, and you can still get almost $600 for it. If you guys are ever wondering where to sell your coins, my suggestion is to find your nearest local coin shop, take your coins in to be appraised there. I get asked that all the time. Where can I sell my coins? If I have this coin, who will buy it off of me? Local coin shops are the best option to go, or auction sites are another good option. Now, on the high end, the 1948 Canadian silver dollar can be worth $2,220 for an MS-60 example. And this bad boy can be worth all the way up to $61,700 for an MS-66, which, as we know right now, is the highest graded example. If you're able to find one of these and it did get the MS-67 attribution, you could easily be talking a $100,000 coin. Now, the Canadian Mint did not officially start producing proof sets until the year 1953, so there are no Canadian 1948 silver proof-like dollars, but they did produce specimen sets in the year 1948. These 1948 specimen dollars are extremely rare and valuable, but not nearly as valuable as the circulation silver dollars. So if you aren't picky and you're looking to fill out a hole in your collection, the Canadian 1948 specimen silver dollar might be a great option. And honestly, the finish and strike quality on it is usually much better than the circulation strikes anyways. So you're honestly paying less money for a better coin in terms of the 1948 specimen silver dollar. In terms of value, it can be worth around $2,500 for a specimen 60 example, which is on the low end of the SP scale. It can be worth around $4,900 for an SP63 example, and all the way up to $13,500 for an SP66. If it got the SP67 designation, it could easily push $20,000. If it got a cameo attribution as well, could definitely add a premium to the coin. The Royal Canadian Mint made the decision to switch from the large 1-cent coin to the smaller penny due to economic considerations and changes in the cost of production. The transition took place in the year 1920 when the Mint introduced a smaller version of the 1-cent coin. Here's a brief overview of how the process took place and some of the reasons for the switch. Cost factors. The primary reason for transitioning to a smaller penny was cost-related. The larger 1-cent coin, also known as the large cent, was traditionally made of bronze and then copper and had a higher production cost. Metal composition. The large cent, which was introduced in the year 1858, was initially made of pure copper. However, during World War I, the Mint began using bronze, which is a copper alloy composed of 95% copper, 4% tin, and 1% zinc. This change was made to conserve copper for the war effort. In the year 1920, the Canadian Mint introduced the smaller version of the 1-cent coin. The new coin retained the same bronze composition but featured a reduced size and weight. The transition involved a change in design as well. The obverse, also known as the head side of the coin, continued to feature the reigning monarch, but the design on the reverse was slightly modified to fit the smaller size. Now, some of the reasons for this switch. Cost savings. The smaller penny was more cost-effective to produce than the larger one. The reduced amount of metal required for each coin contributed to lower production costs. Economic efficiency. Smaller coins are generally more practical in terms of handling and transportation. They take up less space and are lighter, making them more convenient for daily transactions. Adaptation to economic changes. Economic conditions, including fluctuations in metal prices and the cost of production, influenced the design to switch to a smaller coin that could be produced more efficiently. Now, there are several factors that can contribute to lower mintages for certain years for Canadian coins, which can make them much more rare and potentially valuable amongst collectors. Now, here are some of the factors that could contribute to lower mintages for certain years for Canadian coins, which could potentially make them more rare and valuable to collectors. Economic factors such as periods of economic downturn or instability could impact the demand for coins. Lower economic activities might result in reduced coin production. Shifts in public demand for specific coin denominations or changes in payment habits could influence the need for certain coin denominations. Fluctuations in the prices and availability of metals used in coin production, such as copper and zinc, can affect mintages. Higher metal costs might lead to reduced coin production. Advances in minting technology and production processes can influence the efficiency of coin production. If the mint adopted more efficient methods, it might affect the overall mintage. Events such as wars, political changes, or other significant societal events can impact coin production. For example, during wartime, resources might be diverted for war efforts affecting coin production. Technical issues, maintenance, or other challenges at the minting facilities could also lead to lower mintages for specific years. Also, the introduction of new coin designs or modifications to existing designs can sometimes lead to lower initial mintages as people adjust to the change. Collectors might also be interested in the first year for a new design. Some coins might also be hoarded or melted down for their metal content, leading to a reduction in the number of coins available for circulation or that are able to be collected. Now, the three most sought-after dates when it comes to the King George V small cents and the coins that you are here to find out about are the years 1922, 1923, and 1925. Now, I'm excluding the 1936 dot from this list because it is a holy grail coin and it usually will come out of a specimen set. It is not saying that there might not be a few of them floating out there in the wilds of circulation or in a collection, but usually if you stumble across a coin like that, it is going to be a counterfeit. There aren't any notable errors or varieties known for the dates 1922, 1923, and 1925. Instead, their value actually comes from their incredibly low mintages. In the world of numismatics, considering how many billions of Canadian pennies were struck between the years 1858 until their discontinuation in 2012, with mintage figures floating around 1 million apiece, these are not only incredibly scarce compared to low mintage American coins, but also very rare and hard to find when it comes to collecting Canadian pennies. Now, some of the details and specifications for these coins, if any of these are off and may indicate that the coin is not a legitimate example. Online auction sites are rife with counterfeit coins, so these are a few that could be very suspect, especially if discovered in good condition in this day and age. If you do find any of these dates, you definitely want to get a second opinion. Now, I have actually ordered some counterfeit examples of some of the most rare Canadian coins of all time to give you guys an example of how bad this problem currently is. So stay tuned for that video. It's going to be released over the next couple weeks. Now, the specs and mintage figures for the 1922, 1923, and 1925 pennies are as followed. First, we will start with the mintage figures for these three coins. The 1922 small cent has a mintage figure of 7,601,627. The 1923 penny has a mintage figure of 1,019,022. The mintage figure for the 1925 is the lowest of the three. It has a mintage figure of 1,622. Now, the specifications for all three of these small cents are the same and are as followed. They all have a composition of 95% copper, 3% tin, and 1.5% zinc. They have a weight of 3.24 grams, a diameter of 19.05 millimeters. The edge is plain or smooth. They are in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, British, and Australian coins. The obverse was designed and engraved by Sir Edgar Bertram McKennell, and the reverse by Fred Lewis. Now, unlike many of the other coins that I cover on this channel, these coins are actually pretty valuable to find on the low end, especially for pennies. Even if you find them in absolutely terrible beat up condition and they have been put through the meat grinder, you can still get a couple of bucks for these coins. So first we will start with the 1922 small cent. On the low end, it can be worth around $11 for an AG3. Now, that is at the absolute bottom of the Sheldon scale. Even though these pennies are a little bit older, I have known some people that have been able to find them. If you're able to get your hands on some wild penny rolls, or God forbid, a box of pennies from the bank, then you may just be able to get lucky and score one of these dates. Now, the 1922 can be worth around $29.70 for an F12 and around $125 for an AU50. Now, as we start to get into the mint region, the 1922 can be worth around $231 for an MS60, around $1,380 for an MS63, and all the way up to $10,500 for an MS65, which is currently the highest evaluated example. Now, up next is going to be the 1923 Canadian small cent. It can be worth around $15 for an AG3, which is at the absolute bottom of the Sheldon scale. It can be worth around $40 for a VG8 and all the way up to $154 for an AU50 example. As we start to get into the mint range, the 1923 can be worth around $327 for an MS60 and all the way up to $4,530 for an MS64. So it is a bit more rare and valuable than the 1922, and it has a lower mintage figure, so that is not surprising. Now, last but not least, we have the 1925, which is probably the most rare and valuable standard issue King George V small cent. This is the one that everybody looks for. It is a key date for sure, with a super low mintage figure just around $1 million. Some of these were probably destroyed, which makes finding examples nowadays even harder, but I have known coin roll hunters that have discovered 1925s. Now, when it comes to value, it is actually only worth $12.80 for an AG3, so still very valuable for a penny on the low end, but not quite as valuable as the 1923. It can be worth around $31 for a VG8 and all the way up to $107 for an AU50 example. Now, as we start to get into the mint state region, the 1925 is worth around $227 for an MS60, $2,660 for an MS64, and this bad boy can be worth all the way up to $6,900 for an EF40. So when it comes to the values and prices of these pennies, they fluctuate pretty rapidly and they go up and down. It depends on the collector's market, but honestly, depending on which one you want the most, I would want to have the 1925. It has the lowest mintage figure, and currently an MS66 is the highest graded known example. But even though the 1922 isn't worth as much on the low end, it is actually worth the much on the high end, worth around $10,500 for an MS65. So that would definitely be a nice one to find if it was in good condition. The Canadian 50-cent coin, also known as pièce de 50 cents in French, holds a face value of 50 cents in Canada. Since the year 1937, the coin has featured the Canadian coat of arms on its reverse side. A significant historical moment occurred during the opening ceremonies for the Ottawa branch of the Royal Canadian Mint on January 2, 1908, when Governor General Earl Grey struck the first domestically produced 50-cent coin for the Dominion of Canada. This first ever domestically produced inaugural coin was a silver 50-cent piece bearing the effigy of King Edward VII. Although the Canadian 50-cent coin is regularly minted, it is not mass-produced, with an approximate annual average production of 150,000. Since the year 2004, it has been made available to the public exclusively through direct purchase from the Canadian Mint. Encountering this denomination in everyday transactions is quite rare because there's a widespread misconception among many Canadians that the coin itself is scarce. Typically, when a 50-cent coin is used in a transaction, the recipient tends to hold on to it, and it is not uncommon or unusual for people to question the legitimacy of this coin due to its limited circulation. The status of the Canadian 50-cent coin is similar to that of the United States half dollar. Vending machines generally do not accept it even when they accept coins of both higher and lower values. The Canadian Mint made an effort to promote the use of this coin with a special edition released in 2002 to mark the 50th anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's ascension to the throne. However, this promotion was largely unsuccessful. Subsequently, the Canadian Mint ceased distributing the 50-cent coins to banks, and they now sell them only in rolls or coin sets directly from their numismatic department, usually priced at twice their face value, or around $25 per roll of 25 coins. Now, what do you guys say that we get into the coins that you are all here to find out about, and that is the 1947 Canadian half dollars. Now, these 1947 Canadian 50-cent coins come in two distinct styles for the final digit in the date 7. The first style features a tall 7 with a left curving tail at the bottom, often referred to as the straight 7. This is actually the same 7 design used in the 1937 Canadian half dollars. And on the other hand, the second style showcases a 7 with a right curving tail on the bottom and is commonly known as the curved 7. With India gaining independence from the British Empire in the year 1947, the Canadian Mint had to make changes to the inscriptions on their coins. The IND-IMP inscription, which denoted Emperor of India in Latin, was replaced with DG Gratia Rex, signifying by the grace of God. However, in 1948, there was a delay in receiving the dies with the new abbreviation, and there was a pressing need for circulating coinage. To meet this demand and ensure continued production, they actually continued to strike coins dated 1947 into the year 1948. These 1947 coins can be distinguished by looking for a small maple leaf located to the bottom right-hand side of the final digit 7 in the date. Now, for the half dollars, there are 4 major varieties for this date and a few smaller attributions called the narrow and wide dates, which can add even more of a premium to this coin. But for today, we're just going to be discussing the big 4 of these Canadian 1947 half dollars. Now, some of the details and specifications for these coins, including their mintage figures, if any of these are off, it might indicate that the coin is not authentic. There are a lot of counterfeits out there, especially on sites like AliExpress, eBay, and Amazon. You have to be super wary. I've seen all sorts of coins from the 1944 tombach to the 1911 silver dollar and just all sorts of crazy numismatic frauds out there that you have to be wary of. So you want to make sure that the specifications are bang on, especially if you want to get the absolute premium for these coins. So first of all, the mintage figure for the 1947 straight 7. It has a mintage figure of 424,885. Now, if you're watching this video from the United States and you know anything about coin collecting, then you might have an idea of what an extremely low mintage figure 424,000 is. If that was a Walking Liberty or a Kennedy or Benji half dollar, you can be sure that it'd be worth some pretty good money. And that is actually the least rare of the varieties. And then you have the 1947 straight 7 maple leaf, which has an extremely limited mintage of 38,433. The mintages for the 1947 curved 7 and the 1947 curved 7 maple leaf are actually included in the previously mentioned mintages. So if you were to find one of these, they are extremely rare. So if there's only 38,433 examples of the straight 7 maple leaf, there's only a handful of examples of the curved 7 maple leaf, which is actually the holy grail of the 1947 half dollars. Now the specifications for these coins, they are composed of 80% silver and 20% copper. They have a weight of 11.66 grams, a diameter of 29.72 millimeters, and a thickness of 2 millimeters. The coins were designed and engraved by T.H. Paget for the obverse and G.E. Kruger Gray for the reverse. The edge of the coin is reeded, it is non-magnetic, and it has a die-axis in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, Australian, and British coins. So as I give you guys the values for these coins, I'm going to give you examples of what you need to look for to identify with the 1947 straight 7. So to identify this, you want to look at the final digit of 7 in the date 1947, and you are looking for a straight shape and for the bottom to curve to the left. And if you can identify that and it does not have a maple leaf to the bottom right of the 7, then you have the plain straight 7 variety. In terms of its low end value, it can be worth around $9.20 for an AG3, which is at the absolute bottom of the Sheldon scale. That is pretty much silver melt value, so you're not getting too much extra for this coin. But it can be worth around $10.20 for a VG8 and $45 for an EF40. And then we have the rare of the two 1947 straight 7 varieties, and that is the straight 7 maple leaf. Now this is the coin that I have actually owned in the past. I think I paid somewhere around $9 or $10 in a lot on eBay when I bought it, and it was mixed in with a bunch of other silver half dollars, and I could actually cherry pick it out. I could see it in the picture and tell that it was a straight 7 maple leaf, so I purchased the lot right away. And when I sold the coin, I'm pretty sure I got somewhere around $100 for it. But if you can identify the straight 7 and it has a maple leaf to the bottom right hand side of the 7, it can be worth around $35 for a VG8 and $167 for an AU50 example. Now I'm also going to give you guys the high end values for these coins, but I thought I would start it off with the low end values because a lot of the time when you are finding these, they are from scrap silver purchases. So the third of the 1947 varieties is the 1947 curved 7. Now this one isn't worth too much if it's in a low grade condition. It's worth about silver melt value, but it can be worth around $13 for an F12 and all the way up to $55 for an AU50 example. And that is for the curved 7 variety. So to identify that, the 7 should look curved and the bottom of the tail should point off to the right. And then the last of these different varieties you can look for is also the most rare and valuable, and that is the 1947 curved 7 maple leaf. So to identify this, you want to find the same 7 as in the previous coin, the curved 7, so it will be slightly wider and shorter, and the bottom of the tail will point off to the right. And then if it also has a maple leaf to the bottom right hand side of the 7, then you have yourself an extremely rare and valuable coin. Even on the low end, it can be worth around $2,500 for a VG8 example and all the way up to $6,000 for an AU50. So even if you were able to find one of these and it's beat up, worn, and been put through the meat grinder, you're still going to be able to get probably $1,000 for this coin. It is definitely one that flies under the radar. A lot of people focus on the 1948 Canadian coins, but these 1947s can be worth some really good money as well, especially the curved 7 maple leaf. All right, so let's get into the high-end values for these coins. First, we will start with the 1947 straight 7 plain with no maple leaf. So in terms of the low-end value, it can be worth around $100 for an MS60, $280 for an MS63, and all the way up to $3,300 for an MS65, which is currently the highest graded known example. If you were able to find one and it scored any higher, you would probably see quite a price jump, easily $5,000 to $10,000. Next is the 1947 straight 7 maple leaf. Once again, to identify the straight 7, you want the 7 to look straight and slightly taller than on the curved 7, and the bottom of the tail will point off to the right. In terms of its high-end value, it can be worth around $250 for an MS60, $500 for an MS63, and all the way up to $3,100 for an MS65. So it actually isn't much more valuable on the extreme high end, but it is a coin that has a premium on the lower end, and that is the straight 7 maple leaf 1947. So then we have the curved 7 plain with no maple leaf. This one is actually the least valuable on the high end of the 4 different varieties that you can look for. In terms of its low end value, it can be worth around $100 for an MS60, $280 for an MS63, and all the way up to $2,450 for an MS65. Once again, to identify the curved 7, you want the 7 to look slightly shorter and fatter, and the bottom of the tail will point off to the right. And then last but not least, we have the high-end value for the holy grail of these 1947 Canadian half dollars, and that is the curved 7 maple leaf. To identify this, you want to look to the bottom right-hand side of the 7, and if it has a small maple leaf and it has the curved 7 as well, so the 7 is a little bit shorter and fatter and the bottom points off to the right, then you have yourself a holy grail coin that can be worth around $8,700 for an MS60 and all the way up to $18,400 for an MS63, which is currently the highest graded known example that I could find. If you could find one and it scored any higher, you would probably see some significant price jumps. We could easily be talking a $50,000 coin to even $100,000 if it scored in the 66 or 67. The 1936 bar Canadian dime stands as a highly coveted coin heir, renowned for its significant value in the numismatic realm. This particular heir is characterized by the presence of a distinctive bar or die crack that intricately joins the two bottom bows on the reverse side of the coin. Interestingly, despite the undeniable appeal and rarity of the 1936 bar dime, it's worth noting that the grading company ICCS currently does not officially recognize the bar variety for the 10-cent denomination. This actually adds an extra layer of exclusivity to these coins, making them even more sought after by collectors. For the 25-cent denomination, the criteria for acknowledging the bar variety by ICCS, they stipulate that the bar must be sufficiently strong and easily visible under 5 times magnification for it to be officially recognized and labeled as a bar on their holder. In the realm of coin collecting, nuances matter, and the intricacies of the die crack play a crucial role in determining the coin's classification. There have actually been several recorded instances over the past decade where ICCS has refrained from designating certain 1936 bars as their proper designation. This decision often hinges on the perception of the die crack. Even if the crack is complete, ICCS may withhold the bar designation if the crack is exceptionally faint. These nuances underscore the meticulous nature of coin grading and the importance of understanding the specific criteria applied by certification services. As collectors seek to add these rare and distinctive 1936 bar Canadian dimes to their holdings, the delicate dance between visibility and completeness of the die crack adds an intriguing layer to the allure of these numismatic treasures. Now, while the 1936 Canadian bar dime holds its own rarity and value in the realm of coin collecting, it does not quite reach the iconic status of the 1936 dot dime, which is considered one of the most coveted and valuable Canadian coins of all time. The 1936 dot dime is distinguished by the inclusion of a small dot placed below the date on the reverse side of the coin. In comparison, the 1936 bar dime, with its die crack joining the two bottom bows on the reverse, is indeed rare and sought after by collectors, but it does not carry the same historical and minting distinction as the 1936 dot dime. And while the 1936 bar dime may not command the same astronomical values as its dot counterpart, its scarcity and the intricacies of the die crack contribute to its appeal within the numismatic community. Collectors often find joy in assembling sets that include these distinct varieties, appreciating the uniqueness and historical context that each coin brings to their collection. Now, some of the details and specifications for this coin, if any of them are off, then it may indicate that it is not an authentic example. The mintage figure for the 1936 Canadian dime is 2,460,871, and the 1936 bar heir is included in that mintage figure. It has a composition of 80% silver and 20% copper. It has a weight of 2.32 grams, a diameter of 18.03 millimeters. The coin was designed and engraved by Sir E.B. McKennell for the obverse and W.H.J. Blakemore for the reverse. The edge is reeded, it is non-magnetic, and has a die axis and metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, Australian, and British coins. Now, in terms of its value, this is a coin that does command a premium even on the low end, and this is definitely a good one that you can fish out of scrap silver purchases. That would be my best bet. If you want to find one of these nowadays, chances are you're probably not going to be pulling too many 1936s out of your coin roll hunts unless you get lucky and maybe get a collection dump. But the 1936 bar can be worth around $17.90 for a VG8 example. That isn't right at the bottom, but it is almost at the bottom of the grading scale. It can be worth around $123 for an AU50. And then as we start to get into the mint state region, it can be worth around $221 for an MS60 and around $824 for an MS64, which is the highest graded listed example on coins in Canada. Now, just to give you an idea, the 1936 without any errors is worth around $193 for an MS64, and then the 1936 bar is worth $824. So the regular 1936 actually has a higher listed price. It's worth around $1,420 for an MS67. So if you did ever find any of these and you managed to score that really high grade, you would easily be talking a $10,000 to $20,000 coin. If you're a coin collector looking for something truly unique, the Canadian 1936 dot specimen set is sure to pique your interest. This rare set of coins has a fascinating story behind it, and its rarity and value make it a highly sought-after item in the numismatic world. In this video, we'll delve into the history and significance of the 1936 dot coins and explore their place in Canadian coinage and the mystery behind the dot on the coins. So first off, what is a specimen set? A specimen set is a special set of coins produced by the Royal Canadian Mint, usually for presentation purposes. These sets typically feature coins struck with different finishes or in different metal compositions than the regular coinage. They are often made in limited quantities, especially before the year 1970. A lot of the time with the pre-1970 Canadian specimen sets, they had extremely limited mintages. We're talking only 10,000 to maybe 100,000 sets being produced, or even less, and some of the sets were not actually made for the public. They were only presented to dignitaries and employees of the mint. So any specimen sets from Canada before the year 1970 can be extremely rare and valuable. So a quick overview of the 1936 dot specimen set. The 1936 dot specimen set is a collection of pieces that were never intended for circulation. This set included 3 Holy Grail coins: the dot penny, the dot dime, and dot quarter. What makes this set unique is the presence of a small dot. While similar dots had been used in previous years as a means of identifying the dies used to strike the coins, the 1936 dots were used to mark a new set of dies created specifically for specimen coins. The importance of the 1936 dot specimen set in Canadian numismatics. The 1936 dot specimen set is significant for a number of reasons. Firstly, it represents an important period in Canadian coinage history, when the Royal Canadian Mint was transitioning from producing coins with a high silver content to those made of nickel. Secondly, the rarity of this set. With only a few of each different denomination known to exist, it makes it one of the most sought-after items for coin collectors. Canadian coinage has a very long and storied history, dating back to the late 17th century. Over the years, Canadian coins have undergone numerous design changes and were minted using various metals, including gold, silver, and nickel. In the 1920s, the Royal Canadian Mint began transitioning from producing coins with a high silver content to those made of nickel. This decision was made due to the rising cost of silver and the need to reduce production costs. The shift to nickel coins was not without its challenges, as the Mint had to make significant changes to their equipment and processes. Precursors to the 1936 dot specimen set. Prior to the release of the 1936 dot specimen set, the Royal Canadian Mint had experimented with a number of different designs and finishes for their specimen coins. Some early dates of Canadian specimen coins can feature different finishes. Some notable are the matte and mirror-like finishes. Also, eventually some of the later dates receiving high and low relief designations for the strike quality. So let's get into the mystery of the dot coins. What exactly are they and why were they made? The dot coins were created as part of a new set of dies that were used to strike specimen coins. The dots were used to differentiate the new dies from the ones previously used to strike circulation coins, despite their intended use. So how many of these Holy Grail coins are currently accounted for, and where are they now? Some of the historical sales. In January 3, 2010, from the Bellsburg collection, a 1936 dot 1 cent coin certified PCGS SP66 red sold for $410,000 Canadian at a heritage auction. It is among the only 3 known 1936 1-cent coins. The one with the highest grade, this same coin, sold 9 years later in 2019, downgraded to PCGS SP65 during the Cook collection sale, for a similar amount of $415,000 Canadian. On January 12, 2004, during the Pittman collection sale at the same auction house, another 1-cent 1936 coin, certified PCGS MS63 red, was sold for approximately $265,000 Canadian. On April 18, 2013, the same coin was sold again at auction for around $250,000 Canadian. The 1936 10-cent coin. There are only 4 known examples of the 10-cent 1936 coin, and 2 are owned by the Bank of Canada. Some of the historical sales: it sold in October 1997 for $182,160 Canadian. One sold on September 14, 2006 for $130,000 Canadian for a PCGS SP63, and this is part of the X Pittman and Bellsburg collection. One sold on January 3, 2010 for $196,500 Canadian, graded PCGS SP68, which is an extremely high designation, and this is X Maurice Lafortune and Pittman collection. And then another one sold on August 15th, 2019 for $87,800 Canadian dollars, graded SP63, which is X Pittman, Bellsburg, and Cook collection. There are only 5 specimen 25-cent 1936 coins known to exist, and 2 are owned by the Bank of Canada. Some of the notable historical sales for the 1936 25-cent specimen coin: on January 3rd in 2010, one of these sold for $83,500 for a PCGS SP68 example. Some theories behind the reason for the coins. The reason for the creation of the coins remains a mystery. Some theories suggest that they were produced as test pieces for a new set of dies, while others speculate that they were created to commemorate the Silver Jubilee of King George V. Whatever the reason, the scarcity of the coins has only added to their allure. These coins are a unique item in Canadian numismatics. With their distinctive markings and rarity, they represent a pivotal moment in Canadian coinage history and are highly sought after by collectors around the world. Factors that contribute to the rarity and value. The rarity and value of the 1936 specimen set are due to a number of factors. Firstly, only 3 sets are known to exist, making them one of the rarest items in Canadian numismatics. Secondly, the set includes coins with a unique and highly sought after design. Finally, the historical significance of the coins adds to their value. So what does make these 1936 specimen coins so valuable? The reason the set is so valuable is because of its rarity, historical significance, and the demand from collectors and investors. With only 3 sets known to exist, each set is considered a numismatic treasure and can fetch millions of dollars at auction. Even empty storage cases for this set and other early Canadian specimen coins can sometimes be just as rare and valuable as the coins they originally came with. Generally, most modern empty Canadian specimen cases are worthless, but any before the year 1970 can hold some numismatic and collector value. The price for these empty boxes tends to be anywhere from a few hundred to several thousands of dollars for what is essentially an empty wooden box or case, so keeping your eye out for these gems may make you some good money one day, or you may be able to add a nice little piece of Canadian numismatic history to your collection. So the current market value of the 1936 specimen coins. Most would consider these coins to be some of the most valuable items in the Canadian numismatic world. And with only 3 sets known to exist, it's likely that the value of the set will continue to rise in the future. To find one of these sets complete could easily make you a millionaire. The complete set has a book appraisal value of $675,000, but with the right buyer, it could easily be worth far more than that. Comparison of the 1936 specimen set to other rare Canadian coins. When it comes to rare Canadian coins, the 1936 specimen set is in a league of its own. While there are other coins that are considered rare and valuable, such as the 1921 50 cent, the 1921 5 cent, none come close to the rarity of the 1936 specimen set. The discovery and uncovering of these coins. The 1936 specimen set is an intriguing collection of coins that has captivated the attention of collectors for decades. The set was discovered in the late 1950s when a handful of numismatists found an unusual variation in the 1936 Canadian coins. The full set included a penny, nickel, dime, quarter, and half dollar. Some of these denominations featured a tiny raised dot located below the date on the reverse side of the coin. The dots were a mystery and collectors were intrigued. They soon discovered that the coins were produced as a test set by the Royal Canadian Mint and were never intended for circulation. The dots were placed on coins to distinguish them from regular coins and prevent employees from stealing them. The 1936 dot specimen set has been the subject of several high-profile sales in recent years. In 2010, a collector purchased the set for a record-breaking $402,500 Canadian, making it the most expensive coin set ever sold at the time. In 2013, the set was resold for an even higher price of $550,000 Canadian, cementing its status as one of the most valuable coin sets in Canadian history. The set's impact on modern collectors and investors. The 1936 dot specimen coins have had a significant impact on modern collectors and investors. The set's rarity and unique design make it a highly valuable investment, and collectors are willing to pay top dollar for a chance to own it. The set's popularity has also inspired interest in other rare Canadian coins, and the demand for these coins continues to grow. There are other rare Canadian coins, such as the 1911 Canadian silver dollar, which is actually worth upwards of $1 million or even more, and the previously mentioned 1921 50-cent and 5-cent denomination, but they are comparable in rarity and value to the 1936 dot coins. However, the 1936 dot specimen set remains one of the most sought-after Canadian numismatic treasures in the world.